The Sorcadin is a powerful build that can fit into any party with some of the greatest versatility in spell options, gear, and meta magic choices. They can provide solutions in any situation. They are able to command entire encounters thanks to spells such as Hold Monster and Sleet Storm, combined with their boosted spell save DC, whilst having the ability to halt the entire battlefield with spells. They can also vanquish even the toughest foes in the game with their divine smite. With the introduction of patch 8, features such as quickened, booming blade smites, and upcasted shadow blade can deal over 250 damage on a first attack, which is enough to delete most targets with some action economy to spare. Whether you're looking for a class to solo on a mode or for a solid support for your duo or party, this build can be whatever you need on your adventure. There is truly nothing that the Sorcadin cannot handle. Before we get into it, there is a written version of this build and many others in the description. You'll find a PDF filled with familiar in-game images and clickable links that lead to the BG3 wiki for spells, consumables, and gear options. The document is intended as an easy to follow quick reference guide to save you constantly having to take long breaks from your game to find information, as your time is valuable. Before we get on to the build, let's go over some pros and cons of why you would want to play a Sorcadin. Pros: with their high charisma, they make an excellent party face, and I personally believe they have some of the best class dialogue options in the game. No, seriously, this goes so hard. The burst damage and Nova from this build is insane. They are able to delete any priority target in the turn order with critical smites, and if you need it, Paladins have great survivability with inherently good saving throws thanks in part to the class and high AC from heavy armor. They are able to shrug off hits and spells in ongoing battles should they last that long. They also control the battlefield with their high spell save DC, which pretty much guarantees the effectiveness of their spells. Spells such as Sleet Storm, Hold, or Command can disable the enemy altogether, giving you and your party free reign to clear out entire battlefields uncontested, or take down even the toughest of bosses. This leads to a very fun combat cycle of dopamine, seeing your team deal ridiculous damage, or hearing one of the best sounds in the game, the divine smite. Lastly, they can fit into every team composition and scenario due to the flexibility in the way you can gear your build. You can adapt to any scenario or party by swapping your equipment choices and spell choices as a sorcerer. I'll be focusing primarily on control spells, leading into absurd critical damage for this video. But this isn't the only way to play. Now let's go over some cons of the Sorcadin. It is a bit of a slow build-up progression until Sorcerer. I find it's never worth delaying getting to level 5 for your extra attack, which means sticking with Paladin for quite a while until you can pick up your Sorcerer levels. This build can be spell slot hungry and long rest dependent if you lack the self-control to contain your burst damage. That is, unless you goof around with an infinite spell slot and sorcery point gimmick. It's also multiple stat dependent should you choose to play without elixirs. Strength, dexterity, con, and charisma are all valuable and are worth investing. However, we can solve this pain point with optimization. Also, I don't consider Sorcadins as pure support, and the disables come very late into the multiclass. That's not to discount that it is my preferred support because of the versatility between damage and control. And the worst con of them all, it requires you, my dear viewer, to have thoughts and decide what gear to choose. Don't worry, I will explain all my reasoning behind each gear piece to help you make those decisions so you can gear your Sorcadin with confidence. But before we do that, we need to start with a character. For race, it literally doesn't matter because the core of this build is powerful enough to afford you a lot of leeway, so go with your roleplay flavor. However, if you really want to maximize damage output, do consider making a half-orc due to the racial feature, Savage Attacks. When you land a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you deal an extra dice of weapon damage, which can proc multiple times from multiple sources, even on honor mode. I'll go over this in more detail later in the video, but for for now, just know that you don't need this extra damage, but it can add up to a lot. But in this video, we'll use the channel darling, Mummy Milkers, who is a human with no special qualities or benefits for this particular build, except being really hot. When it comes to Paladin subclasses, my preference is for Oath of Vengeance for the very useful spell list, and it's an oath which is almost impossible to break in BG3. Like, you really have to go out of your way to break it. It is important to note here that your oath genuinely does not matter, nor will your sorcerer subclass choice matter later. The core of this build is strong enough that you can choose whatever subclasses you prefer and truly build into your own RP flavor, playstyle, and party composition. I'm not going to go in a deep dive on Paladin oaths here. That's beyond the scope of this video, but I will link to each subclass's oath breaking actions in the description. For the stat allocation, I will give you two variations. The first being a two-handed variant, which I highly recommend for more general party playthroughs without reliance on elixirs. Strength is 16, our main attack roll stat. +3 is okay, and we will focus on our gearing and progression to alleviate this pain point throughout the adventure. Dexterity is flat at 10. Heavy armor has a very high AC, but won't add our dexterity modifier to the total. The low initiative won't be a huge problem since this build is more intended for party use. Con is 14, a reasonable amount to your hit points, and +2 to saving throws. Int is dumped at 8. We just have to be righteous, not intelligent. Such is the way of the Paladin. Wisdom is flat at 10. Most control effects like hold person, fear, slow, and so on require wisdom saves, so I want to at least avoid the negative modifier. Charisma is our secondary main stat at 16, synergizing with the level 6 aura, giving the entire party a +3 to saving throws while they are in range. The second allocation is more focused on solo playthroughs and relies on elixirs to solve multiple stat dependencies. In all honesty, I prefer this stat line for my party playthroughs too, because the higher dexterity score allows me to set up with the shared initiative in this game. Strength is dumped to 8. We will be solving our attack rolls in Act 1 with an elixir. Dexterity is set to 16. As a solo runner, the biggest pain point of Act 1 is initiative. Having a +3 here helps incredibly to offset the variance experienced in the hardest part of a new playthrough. Should you use this in a party, having your Sorcadin in shared initiative allows massive combo setups that delete enemies. Constitution is 14, a respectable health pool, and saving throws for making mistakes. Int is 10. There are a few nasty int saving throws, such as Mind Blast in this game. Wisdom is 10. Be cautious and careful of hold person in your solo run, as that could be the end of your campaign. This is to allow room for charisma to be set at 16, boosting all saving throws to +3 once you get your level 6 feature. Regarding backgrounds, this will depend entirely on how you want to play. In a roleplay run, pick one that suits your character best. As a charisma class, you might want to choose a background with social skills. However, I don't talk to people, so the only thing that really matters to me is athletics, helping you in your shove and throw rolls, which are perfect in this game for gravity assisted insta kills. And with that being said, let's go over leveling. At level 2, we get our signature Paladin ability, Divine Smite. It adds 2d8 radiant to your attacks, increasing by 1d8 per spell level, and deals an additional 1d8 to fiends or undead. This damage is quite deadly. However, when we get a critical hit, we start to see some insane numbers, thanks to all the dice rolls doubling. Before we move on, I highly recommend going to your reactions menu and setting Divine Smite to ask. Every time you connect with an attack roll, you'll get a pop-up asking if you want to use Divine Smite. This allows you to use another spell or ability in addition to your Divine Smite. Next, I recommend picking up Defense for a fighting style, greatly increasing your survivability. As to spell choice, Paladins can change their prepared spells at any time, so you're free to experiment and pick whatever works for you. But if you're looking for a little guidance, here are some recommendations. Command, a highly effective disable, and for a very cheap cost as well. You will not be using this much in Act 1, but as soon as we get a certain gear piece in Act 2, this spell's effectiveness can be almost guaranteed and upcasted for entire groups of enemies. I will go over this spell in detail in the Arcane Acuity section. Chapters are in the description. Shield or Faith increases your AC by 2 and is a cheap concentration. It only costs a bonus action, so you can use it in battle if you forget. This 2 AC is useful and relevant across all acts of your playthrough. Bless is another good option, as it grants a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws. Accuracy is a major pain point for players in the early game, so this really helps offset those low bonuses. If you're less proactive with spells, it does work nicely in the background for checks that need saving throws. Protection from evil and good. This spell causes aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead to make their attacks against you at disadvantage. This also gets rid of frightened and will give you immunity against both charmed, frightened, and possessed. It's good against a surprising amount of encounters in the game, including more difficult enemies like spectators, the hag, and even Myrkul. I would place a large emphasis on using the spell for the Myrkul fight because of his reaction and all the necromites, but we'll go over that later. Divine Favor. Gain 3 turns of an additional 1d4 radiant damage on your melee weapon attacks. This spell has good synergy with certain items and damage, like the Luminous Armour, which we'll talk about later. Keep in mind, the next 3 choices take both an action and bonus action, and also require concentration. But the best thing about these is that you can use these smite spells and add a reaction smite on top of it. All of these variants have a save based on their spell save DC. Searing Smite is the only smite spell you can upcast, dealing 1d6 fire plus an additional 1d6 for each level cast above 1. The enemy also takes a 1d6 fire damage per turn if they fail a con saving throw. Thunderous Smite deals 2d6 thunder and pushes the target 3 meters if they fail a strength save. Wrathful Smite deals an additional 1d6 psychic and frightens your target if they fail a wisdom save. The psychic damage becomes even more valuable by late Act 2, but we'll go more into that later. At level 3, we gain our Paladin subclass feature. Just a note, in the interest of this video not being 4 hours long, I'm only going to discuss the things I actually use. I keep talking about the flexibility and choice this build offers, and these choices are another example of that. Vow of Enmity. For a cost of a bonus action plus your channel oath, this gives you advantage on attack rolls against the affected entity. However, let me give you a secret tip here. Instead of selecting a singular enemy and killing them in a round or 2, you can cast this ability on yourself, giving you advantage on all your attack rolls against all targets for 10 turns. At level 4, we gain the choice of a feat. My pick would be Alert. This feat gives your character +5 initiative, and you can no longer be surprised. The biggest pain point for the majority of honor mode runs is Act 1, and I find Alert takes out a lot of the variants out of combat encounters and acts as a safety net in case the dice don't agree with you in dialogue checks. Another big reason for my choice is the shared initiative in BG3. Your party can act together in unison provided there are no enemies between you and the turn order. Combined with high initiative, you gain advantage on the battlefield, setting up powerful combos with control spells and damage. Yes, you can make a case to use vigilance elixirs, and initiative gear is very contested, and the gear in Act 1 only adds +1 initiative, which isn't enough for me to be comfortable relying on it. Level 5 is a major capstone for the majority of builds, and generally the level where the player feels the increase in survivability and power. At this level, we gain extra attack, meaning we can smite the enemy twice a turn and vanquish them. And with our newly acquired level 2 spell slot, you can upcast your Divine Smite for an additional 1d8 radiant damage. This is a gentle reminder to enable the Ask reaction again for 2nd level spells, and I'll say now that you need to do this every time you get access to higher level spell slots. As a Vengeance Paladin, our Oath spells are actually quite useful at this level. Misty Step allows you to teleport to a space within 18 meters. For a bonus action, you can close the gap fast on dangerous priority targets to vanquish with a smite or get out of dodge. However, if you are not a Vengeance Paladin, sorcerers get Misty Step as part of their spell list. You just have to wait until you have access to level 2 spells. Hold Person, a powerful spell. However, at this stage of the game, you will not have enough spell save DC to warrant extensive use out of it, aside from a few enemies. But when you do, it is almost a guaranteed win condition for your team. The affected target will be unable to move or take any actions until they succeed on a wisdom saving throw. completely denying them their turns. But more importantly, any melee or ranged attack made from within 3 meters will be a guaranteed critical hit. You can twin cast this at spell slot 2 for cheap or upcast it for additional targets per level. If you do not have this subclass, you can substitute both of these spells either with your Sorcerer spell choice or scrolls. For our second level spells, I only really have one that stands out: Aid. It increases the maximum hit points of nearby creatures by 5. For every spell slot above level 2, this is increased by a further 5 hit points. I think this is more impactful once we gain our Sorcerer levels, allowing us to upcast it higher and with a way to replenish this resource. These extra hit points can mean the difference between life and death for your party. Again, spell slots are very contested in a scarce resource early on. They will be used more later when we can use sorcery points to recover a high level spell slot, but for now, you'll be saving the spell slots for smiting your enemy. Level 6 is our final Paladin level, and with that, we gain Aura of Protection. You grant yourself and nearby allies within 3 meters a bonus to saving throws equal to your Charisma modifier, which in our case is a +3. This +3 makes quite an impact, as there are many nasty saving throws you have to roll throughout the game. The ability to shrug off and mitigate some conditions and spell damage makes a noticeable difference to your campaign. Another thing to note is that the duration of this aura is permanent, provided you actually remember to cast it, unlike me. Multiclassing is when we turn our Paladin into a Sorcadin. From level 7 onwards, we will continue all the way to the end with Sorcerer levels. My preference for this subclass is Shadow Magic, as I love the power of darkness in this game. This gives our Sorcadin yet another way to control a battlefield, protect our party, and even mitigate some legendary actions. A feature Shadow Sorcerers get is Strength for the Grave. After reaching 0 hit points, you regain 1 instead of being downed. I've actually had some challenge runs saved by this feature, though it's not the sort of thing you really plan to use. I tend to forget it exists, but it's a very welcome feature when it does proc. With that being said, this is only a preference, and you can pick whatever subclass you wish, as the core of this build relies on actions and spells rather than subclass features. Spell choices are also extremely flexible. There are a few that I consider to be especially useful or powerful, but there are no real wrong choices. Use whatever suits you best. That being said, here are my recommendations. For the cantrips, Booming Blade. For any class or race that picks this up at first level, Booming Blade deals normal weapon damage on a hit and 1d8 thunder damage when the enemy moves. A few takeaways here. First, this is a melee weapon attack roll, meaning it will use our strength or dexterity score to determine the hit, whichever is greater. Secondly, at character level 5, this 1d8 thunder damage is applied on the attack, so you don't have to wait for the enemy to move for the damage. However, if they're still alive to move after our Nova, they will take a further 2d8 thunder damage. We learn this cantrip at character level 7, so our damage progression begins here, and this increases to 2d8 thunder on hit plus 3d8 on movement when your character is above level 11. Next, you can do a Booming Blade per action, meaning if you have 2 attacks for 1 action, only one of them can be a Booming Blade. But don't worry, we can do more than 1 per turn later. And finally, you can smite off this attack. Very efficient and productive damage. Packaged in a cantrip, Minor Illusion is a cute illusory cat that distracts your enemy. And if I'm being honest, I'd be distracted by pussy as well. Evelyn, cut that out. Enemies will walk towards the illusion, and you can take advantage of this interaction. For example, distracting the goblin leaders to their death, or Grim. Here's 2 fun facts. Balthasar is one of the few NPCs that doesn't return to his original location, and you can use this spell while invisible. Definitely sandbox and experiment with this one. It's pretty fun. Friends, this is a powerful cantrip, granting you advantage on the charisma checks, but it comes with 2 downsides. First, in any difficulty, casting this on companions will cause them to lose 10 approval when the effect ends. Additionally, on tactician and honor difficulties, this spell is considered a crime and can cause the target target to become hostile if they see the caster after the effect ends. To mitigate this, it's best to return to camp immediately after exiting dialogue and cancelling concentration on the spell before returning to the world. Warning, this can be an honor run ender, so do be cautious. As for the last one, genuinely pick whatever you like. Cantrips are mostly utility, so you can get creative as you like, or ignore them completely. Light and Mage Hand are the only ones I'd use on occasion, maybe a couple of times in a playthrough. As for spells, here I only have one mandatory pick. Shield adds +5 to your AC and immunity to magic missile as a reaction to being attacked, which greatly increases your survivability. Even though we gear our Paladin to prioritize armor class, there is the odd occasion where enemies do manage to hit us, and for a very cheap resource cost of a level 1 spell slot, we can mitigate any damage against us and have +5 AC for the remainder of our turn. A lifesaver indeed. For the second option, it really is up to you. Enhanced Sleep and Feather Fall are both spells I get a lot of use out of early in my playthrough. The utility they provide is incredibly useful for exploration. Enhanced Sleep triples your jump distance, and Feather Fall negates any falling damage, and the fact that they are ritual spells means I can use them over and over again without any resource cost. At level 8, we gain our 3rd level spell slot, which means our Smite will deal an extra 1d8 damage when upcasted. We also get 2 amazing class features. Meta Magics are additional effects we can add to spells to change the way they behave, and their associated resource cost are sorcery points. I always take Extended and Twinned Meta Magics first. Extended simply extends the duration of a spell. For example, consider using it on command to completely remove the enemy for 2 turns, or on Hypnotic Pattern to deny the entire enemy team for 4 turns. And Twin Spell allows a single target spell to be cast at a secondary target. I personally use this one with the Drakethroat Glaive to apply elemental weapon to 2 different armaments for the day. The last class feature we gain at this level is the ability to create sorcery points and create spell slots. This allows one resource to be traded for the other, giving us a ton of flexibility in resources. Generally, I use this for swapping my sorcery points and lower level spell slots for higher level spell slots, so that my smites hit harder. Throughout BG3's patch history, players have taken this feature far beyond its intended use, allowing infinite spell slots and sorcery points when pushing this interaction to its limit. I'll talk more about that later if you're interested, but it's not required. As for your spell choice here, it is entirely your personal preference and will probably be swapped out later regardless, but a suggestion I have is for Magic Missile. When cast, you shoot out 3 darts of 1d4 force damage that will always hit their target provided they don't have shield. Upcasting creates an additional dart per spell level. In all honesty, I think very long term with the spell and have it to counter Orin's unstoppable charges. Other uses I have for it would be to finish off low HP enemies or to break multiple potions. For those who chose the Shadow Magic subclass alongside me, we also gain 2 versions of darkness spells. One being the normal version you're used to, costing a level 2 spell slot, and the other is the Eyes of the Dark version, which costs an action and 2 sorcery points. Our Sorcadin can actually see in this magical darkness, whilst enemies are blinded in this cloud. This has incredible synergy with darkness-themed parties, and a special synergy with our next spell choice. That spell choice being Shadow Blade. When cast, you conjure a shadowy short sword that deals 2d8 psychic damage and lasts until long rest. This damage increases to 3d8 with a 3rd level spell slot and 4d8 with a 5th level spell slot. Always endeavor to cast this at the highest spell level you can, as the damage can be doubled by literally having a purple rock in our pocket. Going back to the synergy with our darkness, most creatures in darkness are blinded, giving them disadvantage on their attack rolls and allowing attacks to be made on them with advantage. Due to our Eyes of the Dark, we can see through our own darkness, allowing us to capitalize on the synergy with a higher chance to hit, and more importantly, a greater chance to critically hit our targets. Shadow Blade is both a blessing and curse to build crafting. It's so incredibly strong that it really stands above all other weapons, minus very niche setups. For how low effort it is to set up, obtain, and apply vulnerability, your choice of weapon will always default to this spell. That is if you're chasing optimization. I also highly recommend Mirror Image. In fact, I would suggest swapping out one of your other spells in order to obtain it. Just be sure to keep Shield. Mirror Image creates 3 illusory duplicates of your yourself, each one increasing your armor class by 3. When the enemy tries to attack you and misses, one of these images disappear. This spell is huge for survivability as you instantly gain 9 AC. Not many enemies can pierce through this layer of protection, and as it doesn't require concentration, it is very stackable with other sources of AC gain. Incredible value for many adventures and challenge runs. And lastly, for level 9, we gain an additional meta magic, and quicken spell is the pick here. For the cost of 3 sorcery points, you can cast this spell as a bonus action. Action economy is everything in battle, and quickened allows incredible versatility and usage of your bonus action, whether it be to quicken control spells to deny or delete enemies, or bypass booming blades or once per turn restriction by using it as a bonus action to hit hard with an additional smite. Quickened opens up the action economy and your options like a few other things can, and is worth the pick in every playthrough. At level 10, we have access to 4th level spell slots, which means we can upcast our smites for an additional 1d8 radiant damage. Do keep in mind that 4th level spell slots are the upper limit for divine smite. Your cantrip choice here genuinely doesn't matter at all. I did take Shocking Grasp to explore Shockplay at camp. Wait, sorry, I meant for the convenience of opening Answer's dungeon. As for spells, I chose Blur for more survivability. While concentrating on the spell, all attacks against you are made at disadvantage. Paired with our incredible AC, forcing the enemy to use the lower attack roll means you are close to being unhittable. And lastly, for this level, we gain a feat, the choice being Savage Attacker. When making a melee weapon attack, you roll your damage dice twice and use the highest result. If there's anything you gain from this video or me, please let it be that picking Savage Attacker as a feat is the most impactful damage increase for your Paladin. When you use Savage Attacker, it doesn't just reroll your initial damage on your weapon attack, it rerolls every single smite die. With the gear and playstyle shown in this build video, you will roll a lot of damage dice. Not only that, I will promise you methods of guaranteeing criticals whenever you desire, essentially more than doubling the potency of your damage dice thanks to gear and mechanical synergy. I've played many Paladins in my playthroughs, and this feat has always felt impactful immediately on picking it up. I'm always asked why I take Savage Attacker over Great Weapon Master, and the answer is that damage rolls are just consistently higher with Savage Attacker. But don't let it just be my anecdotal evidence. Time to call a maths team. Alright, the best I can aim for here is that most of us gain some general understanding, and the maths enjoyers go, yeah, no, close enough. When you roll damage with the Savage Attacker feat, every die is rolled twice, and the highest number chosen. For demonstration purposes, we will use a greatsword, which deals 2d6. Without Savage Attacker, its average will be 7 damage, and with Savage Attacker, the average will be increased by 27.8% for a total of 8.946 damage. With Great Weapon Master instead, that would be 17 damage. The value of this feat increases the more damage dice you roll, and for Paladins, we roll a lot of smite dice when we attack. Here is your level 4 smite, 5d8, averaging 22.5. Add Savage Attacker into the mix, and this average changes to 29.07. With GWM instead, that would be 32.5 damage. You should notice a pattern developing already, in that the more dice we add to the pool, the higher that makes our average damage. Yes, in 2 of these examples, GWM comes out ahead, but the gap is closing. Now let's add criticals into the mix, sticking with our greatsword and keeping in mind that a critical hit doubles your damage dice. For the sake of simplicity, I'll round out the totals. The weapon hit critical, 46, averaging 14. Savage Attacker increases this by +4 for a total of 18. The smite critical, 10d8, averaging 45, and Savage Attacker increases this by +13. The Savage Attacker total is 76, and the GWM total is 69. Here's the thing, with an average greatsword, Savage Attacker outstrips Great Weapon Master very quickly. I'm only doing basic weapon and smite die calculations here, not accounting for additional damage dice on our gear or weapon riders. With those thrown in, Savage Attacker is just launched so far ahead that the +10 from Great Weapon Master will never keep up. And if that's not enough, the Shadow Blade is easily the highest damage output weapon we have access to, and Great Weapon Master does not apply to it. The Shadow Blade, 48, averaging 18. Savage Attacker increases to 23. 5d8 Smite averages 22.5. Savage Attacker increasing this to 29. The Savage attacker total is 52. And on Shadowblade crit, 8d8 averaging 36. Savage attacker increases this to 47. 10d8 smite averaging 45. Savage attacker increases this to 58. And the savage attacker total is 105 for a Shadowblade crit. Hopefully that illustrates the point well enough to explain why I hold this feat in such high regard, and to show just how easy it is to push your damage before you even get into DRS territory. That's something we'll talk about later, however. For now, let's move on before my brain melts. Moving on to level 11, we gain access to an additional spell, and the spell I slept on for the longest time is Sleet Storm. It covers a huge area in rain and ice, and forces all casters in the area to make a concentration saving throw or lose concentration. However, the reason I chose this spell is for the difficult terrain. Creatures walking on it will have their movement speed halved and will fall prone on a failed dexterity saving throw. Not many people know this. The saving throw is affected by your spell save DC. And trust me, from early Act 2, this spell save DC is so insane that enemies will literally have to roll a nat 20 if they take a single step on the surface. This is a wide, recurring 10-turn spell that removes entire legions of enemy turns. It counters and trivializes a lot of the large-scale combat scenarios in this game, and I cannot recommend this spell enough. Even though I got a few thousand hours in this game, and even more countless hours researching, seeing the enemy slip turn after turn will never get old. We have reached level 12, the pinnacle of our adventuring power. With our multiclass, we do gain a level 5 spell slot here, and the only spell I recommend you cast at this level is Shadowblade, maximizing its potential at 48 psychic damage. What I don't recommend, however, is using Divine Smite at this spell level, as it's capped at 5d8 at the 4th level spell slot. For the spell choices here, I will usually take Counterspell. At this stage of the game, you're more concerned with deadly spells cast towards you and your party members, as you have an abundance in armor class. And also at this stage of the game, you'll have a lot of spell slots and sorcery points to manipulate as a resource to fuel Counterspell. Another mention is Hypnotic Pattern, a massive 9-meter AoE control spell that stops creatures from moving or attacking you. This lasts for 2 turns, and your success rate with your spell save DC will make this invaluable. Consider swapping out a spell for this one. Before we get onto the equipment, I'll briefly go over other build variations. Very popular within the community are Smite Bard variants. Paladin is a martial that has access to full spell progression, meaning a lot of control and smites for the enemy. Flourishes enable you to attack the same target twice with a ranged weapon, or smite multiple enemies with one swing. The updated patch 8 level split introduces Shadowblade as part of Sorcerer levels, and you can take advantage of meta magic manipulation for more spell slots. Do keep in mind, should you choose to play this variant, the Act 1 progression is kinda slow due to fewer weapon and armor proficiencies, and the wait until level 6 to get your extra attack feels like an eternity. Another patch 8 newcomer is the Wizard Paladin, thanks to the Blade Singing subclass gaining 2 attacks at level 6. With access to high level spell slots, we can convert those into smiting the enemy. Scribing spells and having the ability to prepare and change your spell choices on the fly is really fun versatility for a playthrough. Did you know you can use the Elven Song, which is a medium armor, and not interrupt your Blade Song? And a quick mention to Sorcadin. The gimmick here is gaining 3 attacks, but this only works in Tactician difficulty and below, therefore beyond the scope of this video, as it's aimed towards honor mode. In this section, we'll go over the Act 1 gear for our Sorcadin. The order of appearance will be top to bottom, starting with the headpiece, the Grimskull Helm, looted from Grim in the Grimforge. There are many ways to deal with him. Bash him with a hammer, crush him with an owlbear, or even throw a bunch of junk at him while he's vulnerable to bludgeoning damage. The Grimskull Helm is a heavy armor that provides the wearer immunity to critical hits from attackers, resistance to fire damage, and access to Hunter's Mark, a concentration spell that gives you an additional 1d6 weapon damage whenever you hit the affected target with a weapon attack. Immunity to critical hits is the main reason I like this helm, but a resourceless concentration spell can synergize with some of our other pieces later, while preserving our limited spell slots. The other option for headwear is the Holy Lance Helm. It can be found in the mountain pass near the eagles on the rooftop. If you jump across this gap here, you'll find this item in a painted chest. The Holy Lance Helm grants a +1 to Constitution saving throws Powers, and the Smite the Graceless feature. Creatures who miss their attack rolls against the wearer must make a DC 14 dexterity saving throw or take 1d4 radiant damage. Given our very high AC, enemies more often than not will miss our character. The beauty of this item is the synergy of other equipment as we progress our build. Let's go through the armor in order of appearance of early game progression. You can pick up the breastplate +1 next to Damon under cover of a darkness arrow to avoid being spotted. A medium armor which gives you 15 AC plus a maximum dex bonus of +2 and reduces slashing damage by 1. Incredible value this early into the game. The next option is the luminous armor. Found in a trapped chest behind a secret door on the Saluna outpost, you can just jump to it from the waypoint side if you're feeling cheeky or if you missed the perception check. The luminous armor features an AC of 15 plus a maximum dexterity modifier of 2 and the radiating shockwave passive. When the wearer deals radiant damage, they spread 2 turns of radiating orbs to all nearby enemies. Radiating orbs give the affected entity a -1 to attack rolls per turn remaining. We can deal radiant damage at any time via Divine Smite. This shockwave can also trigger off the radiant damage caused by the Holy Lance Helm. The two pieces together, along with our radiant attack damage, makes us increasingly harder to hit, creating a very satisfying feedback loop. The Adamantine Splint is our third option. You'll need the splint mold from over here by the Forge waypoint and a piece of mithril ore. One piece is just past the shallow lava channel. Be careful not to get caught in the Mephit's ambush. You can avoid this by sneaking into a darkness arrow, then standing up, or using a summon to safely trigger the surprise round before starting combat from a safe distance, where you can sneak through the channel and puff all the way to the wall here to break the rock without triggering the Mephits at all. The second piece is down by the lava, past the animated armors. Once Grim is defeated, you can use the forge to make the Adamantine Splint armor, which I really like for its hefty 18 AC and immunity to critical hits. Magical Plate reduces all incoming damage by 2, and successful hits towards the wearer cause an attacker to go reeling, giving them a -1 to attack rolls per turn remaining. For the glove slot, we will make our way to the Shattered Sanctum. Behind Draw Ragslan is a locked gate with a treasure room. He is a pretty tough boss fight, especially at low levels, but you can avoid fighting by passing the dialogue checks or sneaking past and either picking the treasure room lock or passing with Misty Stamp. The gloves of the Growling Underdog give the wearer +1 strength saving throws and advantage on melee attack rolls when surrounded by 2 or more enemies. The biggest pain point in Act 1 is consistently hitting the enemy, and these gloves really help alleviate that problem, as a lot of encounters here have large numbers of enemies. The boots for our Paladin can be found on near in the Grim Forge. He is a tough fight, but assisting the Dagger and Aku or fighting them before destroying the rubble helps. Also consider using the lava next to him to your advantage. Don't worry about his body being in lava, you can definitely still reach his inventory from there. The Disintegrating Nightwalkers allows the user to use Misty Step every short rest. Also, while wearing these boots, you cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and can't slip on grease or ice. Now we're covering the most expansive category of equipment, weapons. I'll go over your choices in order of progression during your adventure and give you my thoughts on each one. Fresh off the Nautiloid, if you see any green +1 weapons, pick them up. Your newly created character will have an abysmal hit rate at this point, and that +1 or 5% matters immensely at the start of your adventure. You'll find these at traders or even a Great Axe early on in the Toll House basement. Once you progress to the Underdark, you'll find Falar Aluv, the slender drow longsword embedded in a rock across from the Salunite outpost. There are many ways to free the sword, but as a paladin, we have an advantage on a DC 10 religion check, leading to a subsequent DC 10 charisma check. The Falar Aluv is a +1 weapon and one of the few longswords in the game with the finesse property, meaning it uses either strength or dexterity, whichever is higher. More importantly, it features the ability Melody, which has 2 variations, Sing and Shriek. I much prefer the Shriek ability. Despite what the tooltip says, it affects all enemies within its 6-meter aura, giving them a 1d4 penalty to all saving throws and attack rolls, and causing them to take an additional 1d4 thunder damage. Now let me briefly introduce you to the concept of damage riders. This 1d4 thunder can be propped multiple times. For instance, on an ability that has multiple projectiles, such as Magic Missile, this thunder damage is added to each one. Do have fun with this one. It's an adored sword in the build community for this reason. However, this next sword I believe doesn't get enough love from the community. Make your way to Wikine's Rest and pay attention to this warning. Do not leave this area or go to camp, otherwise the Flaming Fist NPCs will disappear. The person we're after is Gauntlet Beaver. We're going to use the spell Command Drop. With only a 55% success rate and 3 spell slots, it's kind of rough, and if they spot you, they will become hostile. Consider respecing one or more companions for additional attempts if you want to do that much prep work. I'm too lazy for that, and I often play solo anyway. So here's what I did. I got onto the roof, crouched, and cast Command Drop. Next, I waited until the condition elapsed, and then I went down and helped the fist with rescuing Floric. This will make them leave the area, letting you pick up the weapon without a worry. Svartalbee's Wound Seeker is a +1 greatsword, but the special feature really sets it apart. Deepen the Wound gives the wielder a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls when attacking creatures that have already taken damage. 1d4 this early is incredible, provided you're okay with some gimmicks to get it. Rounding off the list is the Unseen Menace, purchased at the Githyanki Creche from Quartermaster Jira. This +1 pike is an invisible weapon that crits if you roll a 19 or higher and has advantage on attack rolls. If you do miss an attack, it loses this property for 2 turns. Let's talk about the offhand slot. If you do decide to use Falar Aloof or any one-handed weapon, I would recommend pairing it with a shield, as they all add +2 to your armor class, greatly increasing your survivability. While the main thing you're looking for in a shield is the AC bonus. If you really want the best option for your Paladin, I have 2 suggestions. Purchased from Damon is the Safeguard Shield, giving you a +1 to saving throws, which helps, especially early. To craft the Adamantine Shield, you'll need the mold, which you'll find on a skeleton at the very top of the stairs in the Grimforge dormitory area. Use this mold at the forge that we discussed earlier. When a melee attack misses you, the attacker is sent reeling for 2 turns, which reduces their next attack roll by -2. However, the main feature of the shield I adore is the fact that attackers can no longer land critical hits on us. I've had many solo runs end due to a lucky enemy hit, but having crit immunity solves that issue. I know I've suggested so many pieces of anti-crit equipment, but they are truly excellent options for increased survivability. Crit immunity is much more important in a solo or duo run, but it's worth considering in a party also. Our Amulet slot is taken up by the Periapt of Wind Closure. Purchased from Esfa in the Mountain Pass, you'll mainly want it for potent healing, meaning whenever you heal, you do so for the maximum value of that spell or potion. Very efficient in a battle, especially for a certain Act 2 boss. The Ring of Protection you'll find as early as the Druid Grove, but it takes a little effort to get and is very easy to miss. There are 3 consistent methods and some setup involved, and there are a lot of conflicting reports on the specifics. But you can save Arabella from Korga's snake, then pass the perception check, or become a short person to enter the hideout tier. Talk to Mole, who will be looking for revenge, and ask you to steal the Idol of Sylvanas, which you need to agree to. If that fails, you can save Myrkul from the harpies on the beach and get the hideout password from him, but that is a tough encounter early on. Consider making it a little easier with calm emotions and attacking from range as much as possible. Either way, now that you're set up with the quest, you have 3 options. The first is the intended way. Back in the Druid Sanctum and behind this bookshelf, you'll find Korga's locked chest containing this half-torn note, which you can read to trigger a journal update. Head to Ethel Swamp and over to the mud methods on Woodwards. This is a tough encounter at early levels, but you can make this easier by jumping back across the island, cutting off the Woodwards completely, and forcing the methods to chase you down. Focusing the ancient mud methods will destroy their summons at the same time. Just don't get caught in the chain explosion when they die. When you're free to check this dump, you'll find another note hidden inside, which you can take back to the Druids for a confrontation with Korga. The outcome here doesn't really matter. The Druids will stop their ritual, at which point you only have to distract 1 Druid, making grabbing the idol a lot easier. The second option is to come back after you dealt with all the Goblin leaders and Halsin has returned to the Grove. At that point, Mole and her other tieflings will be waiting by the gate, and this is your absolute last chance to complete the quest. If you get to the the tiefling party without the ring, you won't be able to get it at all. This method can be difficult at lower levels, but there are ways to make it a little easier. Get up in the rafters and destroy all the drums before you start. To avoid triggering the entire camp, accepting Gut's special nap time drink summons Gorilla to deal with her for you. Paladins, elves, and half-elves might have to have another party member take over this part for them, or take advantage of the fact that she's alone to deal with her. As for Minfara, well, there's a handy chasm right there. Always deal with Draw Ragslan last, as his death makes the entire camp hostile. The third option is much faster, but be warned, it is risky and could lead to the massacre of the tieflings, and you being forced into combat with the entire grove. Use darkness to cover the idol, stand a few paces away from the idol to give yourself a little time. Take the idol and immediately travel back to camp. If you've done this correctly, you'll avoid any consequences and can move on safely. However you get it, hand the idol into Mole and she'll reward you with the Ring of Protection, granting you a +1 to AC and saving throws. This is the perfect set and forget item for survivability. The second ring slot is honestly a flex slot, and you can choose whatever here, but if you're after a recommendation, I will suggest the Strange Conduit ring, found in a chest in the Inquisitor's room. You can just ignore him and use a darkness arrow to pick it up safely, or you can defeat him and loot the entire place. The fight here can be quite challenging, but I do have some tips that might help. Prone, stun, or hold person prevents him from using his reaction to summon swords. Or another simple trick is just to get another party member to remove his ready to parry, letting you smite him down. This ring adds 1d4 psychic damage when you are concentrating on a spell. Very few creatures in this game are resistant to this damage type, making this ring an excellent damage source, and towards the end of Act 2, we'll be able to apply psychic vulnerability, easily doubling this ring's value. The simplest and most productive way to apply this damage is to concentrate on Shield of Faith, which adds a +2 to your already high AC, making it far more likely that you can keep concentrating. At the Shattered Sanctum, you can purchase the Bow of Awareness from Roa Moonglow, which gives you a +1 to initiative rolls. The top honor mode run enders in Act 1 encounters. This bad initiative, being consistently at the end of the turn order, means you struggle to be proactive in combat and have to react to the enemy constantly. Trust me from experience, I've been dumpstered enough times after bad initiative rolls that I highly recommend that +1 bonus. It isn't a lot, but it does add a buffer early in a new playthrough. Before we move on to Act 2, I'll go over some honourable mentions for equipment, starting with the Doomhammer. You can purchase this off Grat, the trader at the Goblin Camp. The most notable feature of this mole is the Edge of Terror effect, which prevents the target from regaining hit points for 2 turns. Undead creatures also gain disadvantage on attack rolls. I highly suggest keeping this in your back pocket for Myrkul, as it allows you to ignore his necromites almost entirely if you want to. He can be allowed to eat them, which gets him off the field, but it won't actually heal him, so you're never chasing his health. Oh, but Evelyn, can't you just use Bone Chill or Ilmata arrows? No, sweetheart. Those only work until the end of Myrkul's turn, at which point the condition elapses. The heal is actually on the Necromite's turn, and the Doomhammer is the only way to block healing for multiple turns. The Soulbreaker Greatsword can be found wielded by the Githyanki captain in the Kresh. Do be very careful at this fight, as the wolves can auto-crit your character and she can cast Fear. Thankfully, you do have good saving throws and crit immunity, but exercise due diligence against all Githyanki in your honor run. The Soulbreaker Greatsword, when wielded by a Githyanki, deals an additional 1d4 psychic damage. You can utilize this by having Lacel wield it, or disguising yourself as a Give before you equip the sword. I also love the special weapon action, Soulbreaker, which deals additional psychic damage based on your proficiency bonus and stuns the enemy if they fail a con save. Another mention is the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. To me, it is the best in slot for damage optimization, but it is here due to the fact that Paladins are multiple attribute dependent, and this headpiece is mainly aimed at optimizers. You can find this item in the Githyanki Krish on one of the Ardents. Arcane Synergy causes our weapon attacks to deal additional damage equal to our Charisma modifier. That is after we inflict a condition on a target. The game is so generous with conditions that it is well beyond the scope of this video to list them all. However, I won't leave you completely hanging. The Illithid Power ability drain is my preference, as you can apply it by just attacking your enemy. Let's discuss consumables, starting with elixirs. I want to preface this by saying you do not need these for a successful honor mode run, and I do understand the tedium regarding collecting these elixirs and using them daily. However, this section is here if you do want to optimize your hit rate or want to attempt a solo run without restriction. The elixir of Hill Giant Strength sets the user's strength to 21. This score gives you a +5 to your attack rolls and damage, greatly increasing your consistency at this very early stage on your Paladin. It also allows you to pick up targets up to 80 kilos, throw enemies up to 100 kilos, and shove even heavier targets, which can be just as deadly or even deadlier than a divine smite. These elixirs can be purchased in bulk from Auntie Ethel, and she's my preferred dealer in Act 1, as she stocks 3 at a time. Did you know vendors refresh every time you level up or take a long rest? I generally take advantage of this by going to Ethel each time I level up and purchasing a stack if I'm running a party, just to drive the point home. You don't really need to rely on these, they just help. Skip if you're lazy or not interested. The last consumable that is a massive help during honor mode are speed potions, which are crafted from hyena ears and salts. The hyena ears are obtained from fighting gnolls, and as for the salts, you'll find rogue morsels everywhere, and most alchemy vendors carry a large amount. Rogue morsels are my favorite way to farm salts because they're just so easy to come by. For the cost of a bonus action, you gain the effects of haste for 3 rounds, meaning a +2 to AC, additional move speed, and an extra action. This is great for giving us a little extra push to survive, escape, or finish an encounter, and we can lean on these quite heavily over the course of the game. If you don't have a bonus action available, you can sacrifice an attack to throw one at your feet, or even throw one on the ground before combat starts to let you walk through it and maximize your first round action economy. Next, let's discuss Illithid Powers. You definitely do not need these abilities for a successful run, but they offer you some powerful options and flexibility as you progress. Here are some Illithid Powers I recommend you pick up should you choose to do so. Favorable beginnings. The first attack roll or ability check you make against any target gains a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus. This is great for helping our first attack connect and smite in an impactful way, turning the tide of battle outside of battle, and makes your Paladin a great party face for dialogue as well. Color Weak is an exceptionally powerful Illithid passive I enjoy using. When you bring a creature down to fewer hit points than the number of Illithid powers you have, it dies, and all nearby creatures take 1 to 4 psychic damage. So to summarize, the more space gummies you eat, the more likely your enemies are going to explode when you smite them. Should of Rolls is a bubble that gives you 10 temporary HP, but what really stands out to me is that if any enemy manages to go through this temporary HP, the shield pops and the enemy has to roll a DC 15 intelligence saving throw or become stunned. This is great value, especially in a group where multiple targets can be stunned at once or against more powerful foes. Another incredible Illithid power for our Sorcadin is Luck of the Firearms. You can use a reaction when you hit an attack roll to make this attack a critical. If you ever want to blow up an enemy, this is the Illithid power to use. Having a way to guarantee a critical divine smite as your combat opener can be utterly devastating to your foes. I cannot overstate the impact of a well-timed Luck of the Firearms in any scaring engagement. It can absolutely equalize the battlefield for your party or shift the power balance in your favor. Lastly, Ability Drain. I put this last here because should you choose to min-max your damage, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy is great for your helmet slot. Once per turn, if the attack hits the enemy, you drain their strength by 1 point. This is a condition and will proc Arcane Synergy, adding your Charisma modifier onto your next attack. Now for some in-game examples of how to play your Paladin in Act 1. With the Inquisitor fight, our Miss Milkers threw a speed potion on the ground and went into the prism for the bless buff, granting a wonderful bonus for attack rolls. She then cast Mirror Image and Shield of Faith for survivability, as the Gif Yankee Raider in this room can have up to a +13 bonus onto their attack roll. She then cast Inquisitor's Might and immediately went into turn-based mode before interacting with the portal to return without immediately repeatedly getting ambushed. Here, she walked over the speed potion for 2 additional AC and an extra action. Shadowheart attacked the Inquisitor to remove ready to parry, and his legendary reaction spawned swords, which counts as enemies to trigger the advantage condition from the gloves of the growling underdog. Miss Milkers then forced a crit with Luck of the Far Realms. She hit again, low rolling her Divine Smite, and again with another. With a bonus action left, she used Pommel Strike, which lets her trigger the Divine Smite reaction, finishing off the Inquisitor as he was within the Call of the Week threshold. With a comfortable 33 AC, the rest of the fight was ours. This next example makes use of a synergy between the Holy Lance Helmet and Luminous Armour. Here I concentrate on Shield of Faith to bring up my AC by 2, and when the enemies miss me, they have to roll a DC 14 dexterity saving throw or take radiant damage from the helm, which triggers radiating orbs on every enemy within range. These radiant orbs make their attack rolls even worse. Remember, these radiant orbs give them a -1 to their hit rate per turn remaining. Therefore, our enemies are missing even more, making this a self-feedback loop. And once we reach the threshold for Call of the Week, our enemies explode, trying to damage us. Act 2 is where a lot of things start coming together, and we start to really get an idea of the synergies this build uses at its core. We'll have access to equipment upgrades, and we'll finally get into our Sorcerer levels, and our Paladin evolves into a Sorcadin. Again, starting head to toe with the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. To obtain this helmet, we must make our way to the Mason Guild's secret basement area. There's a keyhole here that is revealed by a perception check, and you'll need to either lockpick it or use Mattis's key to gain access. If you do not pass the perception check, you can mächtig them a little bit to the right here to bypass the secret door. From here, you can either fight the shadows or invis past to steal the locked chest. Do note this locked chest is trapped and does a lot of damage, so be careful. The Helmet of Arcane Acuity provides a wearer with battle acuity. Whenever you deal damage with a weapon attack, you gain 2 turns of Arcane Acuity. What is Arcane Acuity? Basically, it's a +2 to spell save attack rolls and spell DC for each attack. Why do we care? Once you have a sufficient spell save DC, you can pretty much guarantee a control spell, even for a boss's legendary resistance. Here's a quick example of a fight. Karnas is quite a scary fight to take on early. Luckily, the Harpers were actually useful for once and threw a potion to heal her. Back in the fight, she traded blows with Karnas, building her Arcane Acuity to 8 in only 2 hits. On her next turn, it was time for a command drop, and it had an 85% success chance. It worked, leaving his weapon lying on the ground for her to collect. Without his arsenal, there was nothing he could really do except spend his turn staring, or occasionally try to Venom Claw our protagonist. In Act 2, we finally get our first cloak piece, and I recommend the Cloak of Protection, which can be purchased from Tally. Like the Ring of Protection, it adds a +1 to your armor class and saving throws. Deceptively simple, but it helps to efficiently scale the survivability of a class that is already extremely solid in both those areas. For our armor slot, we have a lot of choice in Act 2, and I will go in order of progression, starting with the flawed Helldusk armor. Damon can craft 3 pieces of flawed Helldusk gear from Infernal Iron. I'll only go over 2 pieces in this guide, but bear in mind, if you want to collect the set, you can find Infernal Iron at these places. In Act 1, the earliest piece is in the Blighted Village. Here, in the blacksmith's basement. Another piece is in with the rest of Draw Ragsland's treasure pile. A third inside a trapped chest in the Centrum hideout. And lastly, Stonemason Kif in the Grimforge has Infernal Alloy, which works slightly differently due to a bug, which I'll go over in a moment. In Act 2, you can find one on a table at the back of the Wraithwind Masons Guild. Another one can be found in a chest inside the vault next to Balthasar's hideout, and Yu-Gear carries one. It's labeled Infernal Metal, but it can be used the same way. The easiest thing to do is pick up the Infernal Alloy from Stonemason Kif. You can buy or loot it from him, or pass 3 dialogue checks, and he'll give it to you for free. Take this alloy to Damon and choose this option in conversation. You will be able to select this dialogue 3 times to receive all all 3 flawed Hell Dust pieces without using up any Infernal Iron, letting you keep that for Mama K. The flawed Hell Dust armor has 18 AC and can retaliate with a 1d4 fire damage to a foe within 2 meters if they fail a DC 13 dex saving throw. You also take 1 less piercing damage. I did say we'd discuss another piece of the flawed Hell Dust in this video, but we'll talk about that when we get to the gloves. For now, let's stick with armor. This next piece requires us to convince Sorcerer to give us access to Lantarf's secret stash. I want to be clear up front, this is not required at all, and the DCs here are pretty difficult. So if you have trouble passing the checks, don't worry about it. With that being said, let me walk you through the process. Talk to Sorcerer and follow the dialogue options until you get to this one. A DC 14 passive insight check will happen automatically here. If you pass, you will get this dialogue option. Here, you'll need to pass a DC 18 persuasion check and then select this option. Do note that if you failed the insight check, you can complete the conversation, then return to Sorcerer with a different character and select this option. This should prompt the insight check to roll again. With the persuasion check passed, you will have access to Lantarf's full inventory and the Dwarven Splint Smell. And 19 AC, you also gain +2 to Constitution, take 1 less piercing damage, and gain +1 strength saving throws and ability checks. A very sturdy piece of armor at this point of the game. Not many enemies will be able to hit you. The final piece of armor is near the end of Act 2. You can't miss this one as you need to loot Kefrik to continue the game. On him you find the Reaper's Embrace, providing you with 19 AC, Magical Plaint, which reduces all incoming damage by 2, and Reaper's Rigidity, which prevents the enemy from moving you against your will, but at the cost of disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. Honestly, that would have been nice, a Myrkul suck attack. Moving on to the glove slot. You can find the Glove of Battle Mage's power at the Wraithwind Toll House. Do be careful of this encounter here, as she has high initiative and can one-shot you before you can even act. If you have a lot of gold on your character, I suggest dealing with her via dialogue or using invisibility to get close enough to shove her out the window for over 500 damage to pretty much seal the fight. Or if you're a bit of a normie, consider targeting her skulls, eventually whittling her down to 7 HP, low enough for you to end the wretched creature. Once dealt with, make your way past these locked doors to find a chest in this room. Open it to pick up the Gloves of Battle Mage's power. Every time you hit a target with a spell or cantrip that uses a weapon, you gain Arcane Acuity. These gloves have the most janky spaghetti code in BG3 and can trigger off the most random things. Let's start off simple and say they will trigger with one of our core abilities, Booming Blade. When you use Booming Blade, you gain 2 Arcane Acuity, but then after you Smite react, you gain another 2. And strangely, if the Shadow Blade is in your hand, you can just attack and somehow gain Arcane Acuity. It also behaves differently when you combine it with the Helm of Arcane Acuity. Anyways, I've done a silly amount of testing on this, and to save you all the boredom and time, here are some outliers. If you have both the helmet and gloves, using Booming Blade and a reaction smite stacks up to 8 Arcane Acuity in a single hit. Now, should you use an ability such as Searing Smite, you get 10 Arcane Acuity in a single hit. Although max Arcane Acuity in a hit is awesome, it's kind of awkward to use in a practical sense since it eats your bonus action, and just using Booming Blade, Smite, then a quicken spell with your Acuity and bonus action is way more useful. However, the jank doesn't stop there. If you use the Gloves of Battle Mage's power with the Holy Lance Helm, every time the radiant damage procs, you gain Arcane Acuity. I think this has insane synergy with our high AC and could build craft into another fun concept. I even noticed that throwing potions triggered Arcane Acuity stacks. Bad guys aren't the only thing I like to see decorating the floor, so this is a great option for me. As I said, I went down a rabbit hole with these gloves, and I think there's so much more to be discovered with them. If you do come up with something crazy regarding these glove interactions, comment or email me. Okay, if the previous gloves kind of Searing Smited your brain a bit, which I don't blame you, consider these alternatives, which add a 1d4 of their respective damage types, and every bit counts in a build. Giving Damon his third piece of Infernal Iron or Alloy earlier, you'll receive the Flawed Helldusk Gloves. These add a +1 to your strength saving throws and an additional 1d4 fire damage onto your weapon attacks. And lastly, we have the Dark Justicia Gauntlets, found in a box on the bottom floor of where you fight Yu-Gear. They add a +1 to your strength saving throws and an additional 1d4 necrotic damage to your weapon attacks. The damage from either of these gloves might seem small, but once you start adding in the critical hits and Savage Attacker for the rerolls, it adds up real quick. However, do consider the enemy resistances and vulnerabilities to these damage types when deciding which one to use. For the boots, you can choose to keep the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, or if Mattis is at last light in, you can purchase the Evasive Shoes for +1 acrobatics and armor class, boosting your survivability even further. Our Amulet slot remains the Periapter Wound Closure. I just want to reiterate, the max heal roll on this will help you sustain in the Myrkul fight. Even if you're in the ring battling him, you can do this cheeky trick and step out to this part of the arena where his Bone Chill aura won't affect your healing. For our rings, we have a myriad of choices in Act 2, and I will preface this first ring with the caveat that it is kind of risky. The risky ring is purchased from Mirage at Moonrise Towers. It allows the wearer to gain advantage on attack rolls at the massive penalty of disadvantage on saving throws. Evelyn, why on earth do you want this ring on your Sorcadin? Especially when all the gear leading up to this has been mainly aimed at improving saving throws. So my reasoning is that having both a high hit rate and advantage on your attack rolls means that you'll be hitting the majority of the time and critting more than usual. And when we hit our enemies, thanks to Savage Attacker, our damage rolls really hurt. I am a firm believer that the strongest disable that you can use on an enemy is the death condition. If the enemy does not exist, they cannot force you to roll saving throws, so the disadvantage does not matter. There is a cheeky trick that you can do with another piece of gear listed in the Honourable Mentions section that can negate this massive downside, but it is an unintended gameplay feature, and I understand not everyone will want to use it. With that in mind, there is an alternative to this ring in the same section. The second ring I would recommend would be Killer's Sweetheart, found after succeeding the self-same trial. This should be the easiest trial for you as a Paladin, due to the clones being vulnerable to radiant damage. But if you want a quick tip, you can strip your gear off before starting the trial. Your copy will spawn naked, and you are free to re-equip your gear and one-shot them. Killer's Sweetheart is a ring that provides you with the feature Executioner. When you kill a creature, your next attack roll will be a guaranteed critical hit. Keep in mind you can only do this once per long rest, but it's worth it, as this guaranteed critical is everything. It gives you a nuke to store in your pocket and unleash on some of the toughest encounters in the game. Act 2 really ramps up the difficulty with some of its combats, causing many players to opt to solve them through dialogue. But I like violence, so let me give you an example of the impact on this ring on one of Act 2's trickier fights. We're going to pay a visit to Balthasar, and I have to say this line of dialogue goes pretty hard as a Paladin. We rolled initiative, and Miss Melkers immediately went for the booming blade, rolling a critical on the first attack, which saved our Executioner, and followed up with another attack, which we then converted into a critical. We got lucky there, but if you did choose to get luck at the Far Realms in your playthrough, you can guarantee both criticals. Speaking of damage, let's find a weapon of choice to deal it. The Halberd of Vigilance can be purchased of Lan Tarv, who can be found at Moonrise Towers. It's fairly expensive, so do take advantage of his dialogue for 100 approval, helping with acquisition. The Halberd is a +2 weapon that deals a 1d10 slashing damage plus your strength modifier, and adds an extra 1d4 force damage. You also gain the following features: Sentinel Weapon, giving you a +1 to initiative rolls, and advantage on perception checks. This initiative boost is really helpful, as there are a few enemies in this act that have high initiative as well, and sharing initiative with your party helps immensely with setup and coordination. Lastly, it grants advantage on attacks you make with your reaction, but this is only relevant if you've chosen not to use the risky ring. This next weapon will be the most devastating one in our arsenal. Shadowblade is obtained from the Sorcerer spell list as part of our multiclass. At base level, the shadowy AoE sword does 2d8 psychic damage. This increases as you upcast it. The breakpoints are 3d8 with a level 3 spell slot, and at the maximum of 48 psychic damage when you cast it with a level 5 spell slot. This finesse weapon uses either strength or dexterity for your attack roll, whichever is higher, meaning it's always good no matter how you've chosen to allocate those stats. The sole reason this weapon has the undisputed reign over damage is because of our next setup piece literally doubling our damage. The resonance stone can be found at the back of the necrotic laboratory area of the Mind Flayer colony. A tip I can give for this fight is to use the hallway as a choke point for AoE spells such as Wall of Fire or Sleet Storm, or you can just invis past if you're lazy. The resonance stone has a 9-meter radius effect that causes the Steeped in Bliss condition. Steeped in Bliss causes the affected creature to gain advantage on physical checks and disadvantage on mental saving throws. Note that this aura applies to everything in it, including you and the enemy. Combined with your spell save DC, the disadvantage on mental saving throws gives your control spells absurd success rates. We're talking about over 95% chance to lock down the enemies, even cutting through legendary resistances. The most crucial thing to note, however, is this next part. Affected creatures are also vulnerable to psychic damage. The Shadow Blade is our preferred weapon because of this. Vulnerability will double our psychic damage, but only after it's been re-rolled to a higher value by Savage Attacker. It's really hard to overstate the devastating effect this combo can have, but if you've never tried it out before, I highly recommend it, even just one time, purely for the dopamine rush of seeing your enemies deleted. However, do note this has no effect on constructs and undead. Sadly, notable bosses such as Answer and Myrkul don't take double damage from our Shadow Blade, but they will still take psychic damage. You'll need a completely different weapon for Steel Watchers on the other hand, as they are immune to psychic damage. Let's get back to the rest of our equipment. Once you've swapped from the Halberd to the Shadow Blade, you'll probably want to use a shield for survivability. The Adamantine Shield still holds strong, providing immunity to critical damage for those on a solo run. If you want an alternative for this slot, consider the Sentinel Shield, purchased from Lantarv at Moonrise Towers. The Sentinel Shield gives the user a +3 on initiative rolls. This is a huge boost, especially when initiative only uses the D4. There are also few enemies in the game who have extremely high initiative bonuses, which this shield can help you compete with and get in another round of Divine Smites before they can act. Near the end of Act 2, and unmissable is Kefrik's Shield. The most notable and important feature is the +1 to spell save DC and spell attack rolls, helping you land your most important control spells. The advantage to dexterity saving throws provided by the shield also nullifies the disadvantage from the matching piece of his armor. Our bow slot will remain the Bow of Awareness, which we obtained in Act 1. It's a very simple +1 initiative stat stick. Moving on, we have Honourable Mentions for Act 2. Next is the Luminous set, with the entire concept revolving around applying radiating orbs, which activate through radiant damage, making us harder to hit, and essentially making us an evasion tank, which is a self-fueling cycle. These first two pieces we've already obtained from the guide, but I'll go through them briefly again. The Holy Lance Helm, obtained from the chest in the Mountain Pass, smites the enemy for 1d4 radiant if they fail the DC 14 Dex saving throw. Add in the Luminous Armor, obtained from the Saloon Outpost in the Underdark, which spreads luminous orbs in an area when you deal radiant damage. These next two pieces are new, and you can find them in Act 2. The Callous Glow Ring can be found in a vault next to the room where you first meet Balthasar. This ring does an additional 2 points of radiant damage against creatures that are illuminated. Simply cast light as a vessel for this ring to work wonders. And lastly, the Luminous Gloves, which can be found in the Potter's chest right next to the measles. Whenever the wearer deals radiant damage, the target receives 2 turns of radiating orb. Basically, we have so much radiant damage in our toolkit, we can apply these orbs everywhere. The enemy tries to hit you and gets hit for more radiating orbs to a maximum of 10 stacks, which means a -10 to their attack rolls. Combined with our tanky armor class, this makes you an almost unkillable machine thanks to this perpetual feedback loop. However, another suggestion I can give is to swap out the gloves buffs with Battle Mage's power. There's this janky interaction with the Holy Lance Helm, where you also gain Arcane Acuity stacks from the radiant damage caused by an enemy trying to attack you. The Shadow Cloaked Ring can be found on the corpse of the Shadow Mastiff Alpha. After revealing and defeating the pack of Shadow Mastiffs a little way from Last Light End here, destroy all of these magically lit torches to start the encounter with the 4 doggos. The Shadow Cloaked Ring simply gives you an additional 1d4 of your weapon's damage type against obscured targets, making this quite potent when used with the Shadow Blade, especially when Resonant Stone doubles the damage and criticals doubling the damage dice. There is also incredible synergy with a certain spear, something we'll go more into detail in Act 3. Now this next trick seems alright but Jahira, if you ask me. Tally sells the Shield of Devotion, which has this really unique intended feature that can make our lives much easier. When you equip the shield, you gain an additional level 1 spell slot, which you then can convert to sorcery points. Even better, you get that additional spell slot every time you re-equip the shield. You can probably see where this is going. We converted all our spell slots to sorcery points and all sorcery points to level 2 spell slots. The game remembers how many spell slots you've created, and after taking a girl nap using our Angelic Reprieve potion, we wake up with more spell slots than we know what to do with. And after repeating this loop a few times, nice. The Drakethroat Glaive is something I pick up from Roa Moonglow on every playthrough. For the ability Draconic Elemental Weapon, you can buff another weapon with this ability to give it +1 to attack rolls and to deal an additional 1d4 acid, cold, fire, or lightning damage until long rest. This might not sound like much, but those extra damage dice also get re-rolled by Savage Attacker and will be doubled on a crit, helping us build up our snowballing damage. You can also twin cast this effect onto another party member's weapon for even more party damage. Shah Spear of Evening. To obtain this spear, you will have to make Shadowheart's evil choice when confronting the Night Soul. This +3 weapon provides blind immunity, but the most notable feature is the fact that you can cast Darkness as many times as you want without any resource cost. It has a per turn cooldown, which is 6 seconds if you're playing in real time. Very useful for saving on Darkness arrows or scrolls. It will also deal additional damage to targets that are obscured, and as a piercing weapon, it's a perfect candidate for a piercing vulnerability setup in Act 3. This next armor is more of a setup piece for our build, the Shade Clinger armor. Also purchased from Tally, this armor is used for one feature, Shade Clinger. While obscured, you gain advantage on saving throws. I want to preface this by saying you absolutely do not need to do this, as it is an unintended game feature, but it is here in this video if you want to make use of it. If you'd rather not use an exploit, feel free to skip to the next gear piece. For those who stayed, here's a cheeky way to have the Shade Clinger condition stay on, even when wearing different armor. First of all, find an obscured area. You can confirm this by seeing the Clinging Shadows buff. Next, unequip or change to a different armor piece. Your Clinging Shadows buff will remain until your next long rest and stay on even if you're in broad daylight. Unfortunately, the Risky Ring gives disadvantage on saving throws, but the Shade Clinger buff gives us advantage, which means the two cancel each other out, leaving us with a normal single dice roll. Regarding consumables, we have a few more choices. Again, not required, but they are a nice quality of life for our Sorcadin. The Potion of Angelic Reprieve can be purchased in bulk from Lantarv at Moonrise Towers. When you use this potion, you fall asleep for 2 turns, waking up with the effects of a short rest, and all level 1 and 2 spell slots are restored. This is great news for our Sorcadin, as it means we can blow our spell slots whenever we like and take a gamer girl nap to refresh most of them. Now here's where it gets silly, because there's a little trick you can do with your ability to create spell slots. Note that you do not have to do this, but it's an option for my fellow dopamine enjoyers who need to hear that oh so sweet divine smite sound often. You can use create sorcery points and create spell slots over and over again. Let me demonstrate to you what I mean. I convert all my level 2 spell slots to sorcery points, and my sorcery points to level 2 spell slots, and my spell spell slots to sorcery points, and so on and so forth until I decide to use an angelic reprieve to girl nap and wake up with more spell slots than I know what to do with. You can repeat this cycle as many times as you want, but honestly, 2 or 3 cycles is all you need because it's exponential. Do be warned, these do not persist after long rest or when you use a restoration pod. And also, you do not need this trick. It is catered for those who want to have extended periods of battle or fun on a subsequent playthrough. And the last consumable is the Cloud Giant Elixir. I'll just go over it very briefly as you'll only reach level 9 near the end of Act 2, which is a level requirement for traders to stock this elixir. The only trader at this point will probably be Tally, who moves to Moonrise Towers during the raid. The Cloud Giant Elixir sets the user's strength score to 27. This is a massive +8 onto your attack and damage rolls. I'll reiterate that these are not required for a successful playthrough, but add a lot to your character. Keeping this section brief, I'll suggest one new addition to your Illithid Powers. That addition is Stage Fright. All enemies within a 6-meter radius must pass a Wisdom saving throw based on your spell save DC. On failure, they will have disadvantage on attack rolls and take 2d6 psychic damage every time they miss an attack for the next 3 turns. Combined with your high AC, spell save, and resonant stone, enemies will blow themselves up trying to attack you. And also reiterating how important criticals are for our damage. Do remember, you have Luck of the Far Realms on tap, and Killer Sweetheart if you want to delete any enemy per long rest. And yes, you can do both of these criticals on the same turn. I will give you an example in the next section. Closing the Act 2 section, let's go over some gameplay examples for our Sorcadin in Act 2. One hard rule I have for my honor runs is to never underestimate the Githyanki. So we're going into this fight without mercy. Miss Milkers snuck up to the stairs to reveal a Githyanki ambush. She then prepared a booming blade on the radar and a 2nd level smite to delete him. This gave her another action thanks to Bloodlust. The 2nd attack took out the other radar, and for a last action, she went for a hold person with 10 Arcane Acuity. She has a 98% probability on the Githyanki Warlock. This succeeded, and she ended her turn. The enemy did nothing, as this was a surprise round. On her next turn, she started with Booming Blade, a guaranteed crit, and followed up with another attack, ending the most dangerous opponent on the field before she got to respond. With another Bloodlust proc, she upcasted Command Drop on the warriors, both with a 95% success rate. It hit, and she jumped down, collecting the weapons. On their turn, surprisingly, they were able to connect their attack rolls, but our shield spell kept things in check. Our next turn was our last one, or should I say, their last one. This next gameplay example is the Halcyon Portal fight. Miss Milkers fired an arrow of many targets, building her Arcane Acuity up to 8 on the first hit and max on the second. She then quickened and cast Sleet Storm from a scroll. Okay, not many people know this, but the saving throw for slipping on your ass and missing your turn entirely is based on the caster's spell save DC. And in our case, it is an insane DC 25. The enemies have to literally roll a nat 20 to save themselves slipping on the turn, and they have to repeat the save every time they step on the surface. The enemies kept slipping again and again. Honestly, the singular spell trivialized such an overwhelming encounter in the most comedic way. And for the last example is the honor mode run ender himself, Myrkul, the avatar of death. One of the very reasons for making this build guide is to help alleviate the community's pain points with this encounter. Let us take out the anxiety out of Myrkul together, shall we? Before going down the elevator, we upcasted Aid at level 4 to increase our health pool as a buffer and protection from evil and good, which will provide the undead disadvantage on their attack rolls against us, plus the added benefit of immunity to frightened, an effect that Myrkul loves using. Mummy Milkers sacrificed a level 2 spell slot for more sorcery points. She created a level 4 spell slot with it, which is our highest damaging smite upcast. Then she sacrificed another level 2 spell slot for 3 sorcery points, which is enough for 1 quickened meta magic. Pre-battle prep was just a thrown fly Fly and Invis Potion, letting Shadowheart get the jump on the Mind Flayer, halving his health and giving us a surprise round. Shadowheart deleted the Mind Flayer, a very serious threat to the party. Since Mummy Milkers freed Evelyn from invisibility, she still had her action, so she flew down and killed an Intellect Devourer, charging her killer Sweetheart for a stored critical. The surprise round passed. Then it was our turn. She smited Kefric using smites at level 2 in order to conserve her high level spell slots. On Kefric's turn, he rolled 22 on his attack. We chose to react with shield, giving us a +5 to our AC, nullifying his attack and pretty much all future attacks against us this turn. We spent the next 2 turns conserving high level spell slots and chipping away at his health, getting ready to push him to phase 2. For phase 2 of this fight, we go all out. Miss Milkers went for a Booming Blade and used her Executioner crit. As you can see from the damage log, since we rolled a critical, all the damage dice are doubled. Every source of damage has re-rolled instances thanks to Savage Attacker, but the wildest amount of re-rolls that happened would go to Divine Smite. Miss Milker's next attack, she purposely chose the Divine Smite only at level 3, and this only did 40 damage. Here, you can see the major difference in damage between normal attacks and criticals. Why did I only smite at level 3? Well, to make room for a quickened Booming Blade into a forced critical, thanks to luck of the Far Realms, dealing 113 damage and leaving Myrkul in the red. Not a bad effort for an action point and bonus action. Curious, I had Shadowheart throw a speed potion at Miss Milkers, and she left him at 75 HP for turn 1. An insane effort for 1 character's worth of damage in a single turn. There are many layers of failsafes in this build for you to comfortably take on Myrkul. You are immune to his frightened condition thanks to protection from evil and good. Plus, you have good saving throws to maintain concentration. Your armor class is high and shield is there to boost it if you still have a reaction available. And if all else fails, you can max roll the heal to sustain thanks to the Periapt. If you walk away outside this circular donut shape of the arena, there is a spot here where Bone Chill does not affect you. And turn 2 was all over for Myrkul. Our Sorcadin dealt the entirety of the boss damage here, just to showcase the elements I've been talking about. In a regular on a mode run, you would never have to sweat this hard to win, but now you can hopefully see the potential in this class and feel more secure with such a powerful addition to your party. Act 3 opens up a lot of choices and synergies for our Sorcadin. We're going to mix things up for this section. Here, I'll split the build into 3 variations. There are a lot of repeated slots, so I would recommend following this first example. Think of the first version as the primary build, and we'll adjust gear from there to create the other 2 variants, starting with my preference. A hybrid build that balances damage and spell save. I prefer this build because you have the capacity to completely remove the enemy's turn or to simply delete the enemy. The whole philosophy behind this build variation is that I've traded some survivability in terms of my helmet and cape slot for spell save DC, which allows me to control my enemies or set up my team for a damage nova. Honestly, all the AC in the world doesn't matter if there are no enemies left to attack you. With that being said, there are larger battles where you'll have a lot of mobs to deal with after defeating the boss. The AC and spell saving throws provided by this loadout will more than suffice for those scenarios. Let's start with the headpiece. The Hood of the Weave can be purchased from Mystic Carrion. There are a few ways to get into his mansion, but a lazy way that's convenient is to read this parchment, which is located on a crate near the secret entrance to the guild hall. This will give you a password to enter this stone wall here, where you can then talk to Mystic Carrion and start trading. The Hood of the Weave adds a +2 to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. Incredibly effective for landing your control spells such as Haunt, Sleet Storm, or Command on your Sorcadin. But Evelyn, isn't the Arcane Acuity helmet more effective since it gets +10 to spell save? You're completely right on that front, but I'm a lazy person and sometimes I cannot be bothered building the stacks up. The Hood of the Weave's passive +2 bonus is more than enough in most situations, especially combined complete with the other gear choices I have in this act. Speaking of, the Cloak of the Weave can be purchased from Helsik, who is located at the Devil's Fang. For you to see this item, you'll need to pass the DC 15 Arcana check around her shop to realize she's a Diabolist, or if you're playing a Dark Urge, you get a free pass. The Cloak of the Weave gives you the following: Absorb Elements, which you can completely ignore because it doesn't function properly, which leaves the last feature, Arcane Enchantment. You gain a +1 to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. Again, we're boosting our spell save DC, so our enemies have a hard time passing their saving throws against whatever spells we throw at them. Moving on to the armor. As much as you'd probably like me to complete the weave set, trading that much AC for just one spell save DC wasn't worth it. Besides, the main reason was aesthetic. I love my Paladin in armor, not tattered rags. My preference for armor is the Helldust armor, and to obtain in Act 3, you'll have to defeat him in a difficult fight. That is if you're not playing a Sorcadin. I highly suggest getting the other equipment from this list before you attempt this fight. But basically, with your high initiative and Raphael's somewhat average wisdom saving throws, your spell save DC should give you greater than 85% chance to landhold monster, and then smite him to another layer of Avernus. Don't worry about your radiant damage being reflected. It won't be an issue while he's held, but do be careful with his cambions while they have fleeting protection. Once defeated, you can find the Helldust armor, a legendary armor that has a sturdy 21 AC, and many features such as Fly, a bonus action ability, rechargeable on long rest. This version of the ability does not require a concentration slot, and is great for players doing non-Illithid playthroughs. Infernal Retribution. When you succeed a saving throw, which you most likely will, the creature who cast it takes 1d4 fire damage per turn. And Prime Aegis of Fire. You have resistance to fire damage and cannot be burned. You also take 3 less damage from all sources. This is very nice, as there are a lot of enemies that deal fire damage to you in the game. A flat 3 reduction is very nice to have as well, and this does stack with Heavy Armor Masters -3 for those who want to try. However, the biggest meme yet with this armor is this. Remember the defense fighting style we got all the way back at level 2? This +1 is added twice when you wear another piece of equipment classified as light, medium, or heavy armor. For the glove slot, let me ask you a question. What's more important to you? Roleplay and staying true to your oath, or being a power gamer and seeing big number? Because choosing this pair of gloves will break your oath. The Crater Flesh gloves can be bought off a Buzzy Girl, who only shows up should you decide to follow through and become an unholy assassin. Do you know killing the Holophant here will break every Paladin's oath? The Crater Flesh gloves are one of the few damage rider sources surviving in honor mode post-patch 8. The wearer of these gloves will gain Craterous Wounds. Whenever you score a critical hit, deal an additional 1d6 force damage. Now, this is probably one of the jankiest and most complex damage interactions you will learn about today, and I will try my best to break it down for you. First off, 1d6 actually crits for 2d6, and every time you crit, any source of damage creates another line of damage. Let's go with the damage rider sources of Craterous Wounds in this example. The crit itself, the Divine Smite, and the Divine Smite bonus dice on a Fiend because we were attacking a Raphael. The tooltip says 1d6 damage on a critical hit, but we rolled 66 for that attack. These are just the basics. However, if you ever go down the rabbit hole of damage rider sources, you can achieve lines upon lines of damage. In all honesty, the boots are a flex slot, and you could probably get away with being barefoot, but we have to dress properly as a paladin. So my pick would be the Boots of Persistence, which can be purchased from Dammon in the lower city. The wearer gains a +1 to dexterity saving throws. Freedom of movement, meaning your movement speed is not reduced by the difficult terrain, spells, or magical effects, and you cannot be paralyzed or restrained. Awesome for certain encounters. Our main hand weapon remains the Shadow Blade. Once you reach level 12, you will be able to upcast the Shadow Blade using a level 5 spell slot. This will increase the base damage to 48 psychic, plus your strength or dexterity modifier. The weapon uses whichever is higher and includes that modifier as psychic damage. Don't forget that just running around with the Resonance Stone in your pocket will double all psychic damage. Do I need to say what happens when you crit? Victoria's Walking Fortress can only be obtained after defeating the House of Grief encounter. The enemies here can be overwhelming, and do be very careful with Iconia's legendary action, a last-ditch spell which can wreak havoc in your party. Take advantage of the stairs as a choke point, even the corridor outside if you need it. Also, here's a sneaky trick you can do in a party. Cast Sleet Storm, then cover it with a wall of fire. They will continue to burn and struggle to move each turn as they slip. They can bypass your gauntlet by shadow stepping to obscured areas, but dropping a moon lantern nearby prevents them from doing this. Iconia's Fortress is a legendary +3 shield. It has the following features. Bulwark Rebuke. When a foe hits you with a melee attack, you can use a reaction to deal 2d4 force damage and possibly knock it prone. On a successful save, the target will not be knocked prone, but they will still take half damage. Reflective Shell. A bonus action ability that reflects any projectiles targeted at you back to the point of origin. This ability is rechargeable on short rest. Warding Bond. Give an ally resistance to all damage, +1 AC and saving throws, but you will share any damage they receive. And lastly, and honestly, the most important feature for Act 3, Spell Guard. You gain advantage on saving throws against spells, and spell attack rolls against you have disadvantage. This offhand item can be monumental to your survival. Up to this point in the game, a high AC and preparing for certain fights that feature difficult saves has been enough to protect us. However, Act 3 contains many more dangerous spells and spell effects, and you have to deal with them much more often. In addition, the enemy's chance to hit continues to scale upwards, meaning AC remains extremely important, so you have to account for both methods of defense. If survivability is your goal, you need the shield. For our next slot, we will pick the Amulet of the Devout. First, go to the Stormshore Tabernacle and head down the wooden hatch. If you keep getting spotted, consider using a Darkness Arrow. Once down in the basement, do be very cautious of the traps here. In the main offering chest is the Amulet of the Devout. I want you to ignore this channel divinity charge and focus on this line. High spell casting grants you an additional +2 to your spell save DC. Incredible value for your control spells. For our jewelry, we're keeping the risky ring, but we'll change out the second slot. Continuing the theme of spell save DC, we will move on to the Ring of Feywild Sparks. You will have to defeat the Hag in order to obtain it, and it's a pretty difficult fight, so let me give you some tips. First, dealing with the Pearl Spore Bells. Consider using ranged attacks or spells or multi arrows, and fire will stop their healing. Note that these are immune to psychic damage, so swap out your Shadow Blade before you start combat. You are very well prepared for this fight and shouldn't struggle too much. Your armor reduces the damage from Ethel's Insect Plague. Ray of Sickness misses most of the time, and your boots make you immune to hold person. For the actual fight itself, I would recommend bursting it down with smites. Do turn on non-lethal attacks or use your Hag's Bane if you wish to save Vunra. Once dealt with, you can find the Ring of Feywild Sparks on the Hag. Oh, but Evelyn, doesn't this ring only work for wild magic sorcerers? I get this question often, and I don't blame you for thinking that. However, this ring has a hidden +1 to spell save DC, not indicated by the tooltip, and the proof is here, shown by the in-game combat log. Again, we're boosting our spell save DC to an absurd amount, which should be 21 at this point, and I don't think there's any enemy that can consistently pass their saving throw against your spells. Your control is super reliable, and even on the odd chance that an enemy has miraculously saved, you have Quicken or Terrasol to try again instantly to stop them in their tracks. Lastly, the range slot belongs to the Hellrider Longbow, purchased from Ferg, the Sharon Trader in Rivington. Do note, if Shadowheart is around, he will not trade with you. Just leave her at the waypoint or dye her hair brown if you wish to see his wares. The Hellrider Longbow grants the holder +3 to initiative rolls and advantage on perception checks. We're pretty much just equipping this bow as a stat stick. Remember that BG3 uses a D4 for initiative, and Larian implemented a shared initiative system, allowing you to have party members acting at the same time when they are together in the turn order. A +3 to your initiative helps you to consistently go before the enemy in combat and set up combos with your party for battlefield control and insane damage novas. Our next variation is quite thematic, suiting the Paladin fantasy of striding into battle with their heavy armor and two-handed sword. This loadout is more suited for players who don't want to manage elixirs every long rest and just want to hit things really, really hard. Do note, however, to make the most out of this variation, you have the option to respec and swap out Alert for the Great Weapon Master feat for plus 10 onto your damage rolls. Let's gear up our Paladin, starting with the headpiece. The Helm of Baldurin can be found in Ans's lair on top of a stone altar. You can sneak past the undead dragon and obtain this without a fight. The Helm of Baldurin is a legendary piece of headgear that grants you the following features. Attackers cannot land critical hits on the wearer, an absolute boon in solo runs, or to mitigate variance in enemy attacks in your Honor playthrough. Baldurin's favor, granting a +1 bonus to AC and saving throws. Probably the second most important feature, boosting our survivability just that bit more. It definitely always helps. Baldurin's vitality heals you for 2 hit points at the beginning of every turn. This doesn't do much for us in the scope of our Sorcadin build, but has self-synergy with other items should you choose to explore it. And finally, stun immunity. Mind Blast during the finale is probably the scariest stun. Also, do be warned, as I've found out the hard way, this stun immunity does not work against the stunning gaze ability those Baal cultists use. For our back slot, we have the Wave Mother's Cloak. To find it, you will have to make your way to the Water Queen's house. Invest your way past the guards on the top floor, and behind her desk is an opulent chest containing the item. Do consider using darkness to avoid being detected. The Wave Mother's Cloak grants you Damn Vegas, and it only works during combat. Once per turn, you gain a +2 to armor class and saving throws. That is, until you get hit. You also can't be burned and have resistance to fire damage. Honestly, this is a straight upgrade from the Cloak of Protection. Yes, if you do get hit, it stops working for that round, but the chances of you being hit are low enough that it's worth the slight gamble. The Armour of Persistence can be purchased from Damon in the lower city. Sitting at a hefty 20 AC, you also gain Magical Plate, reducing all incoming damage by 2. If that damage reduction seemed too little for you, the wearer of this armor also gains Blade Ward, halving any form of bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage done to you. To top this all off, you also have a bonus 1d4 to saving throws thanks to the resistance condition, an incredible piece of armor that allows you to just shrug off both spells and physical attacks, assuming you can even get hit, which is unlikely with your high AC. Our gloves will be the gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength. To obtain these, you will have to take the portal to the House of Hope. They're located on a pedestal in the archive. You can actually obtain this very early. However, do note, you will have to fight Raphael if you mess it up. The conventional way would be to use the DC 20 sleight of hand check to disable the trap, or if you place a heavy object onto the pedestal, you can swap out the gloves into your inventory. Make sure no one sees you doing it. If you are successful, you can literally just leave the House of Hope by the portal. If you did mess it up, you're going to have to fight Raphael to leave. However, if you're okay with some shenanigans, you can use the Pixie Bell to trigger a dialogue, snell at her to get turned into a cow whilst you're polymorphed. This way, you ignore red areas of the map, which generally restricts you from teleporting. This means you can just pick a waypoint and teleport to it, choosing to fight Raphael whenever you're ready. The Gauntlet to Hill Giant Strength sets the wearer's strength to 23, which is a +6 onto your attack rolls and damage rolls. You also gain a +1 to strength saving throws. These gloves are great for those who prefer playing builds that don't require elixirs. Again, we'll use the Boots of Persistence from Damon for the +1 to dexterity saves and the freedom of movement, which can be a lifesaver. And now for a sword worthy of our Sorcadin, Baldurin's Giant Slayer. To get this sword, you must first fell a legendary dragon, but it won't be easy. Answer is one of the toughest encounters in Act 3 and has some unique surprises to watch out for. First, be aware that reducing his health bar to 0 will grant him 100 temporary hit points and cause him to go immediately into his gather energy phase. You will see the Answer's Eye condition on your characters, and anyone who still has this condition when Answer takes his turn will most likely be one-shot by the 18 D10 lightning damage his Stormhunt Nova will inflict. In Honor mode, it is raining inside of his arena, making all characters wet. This wet condition doubles any lightning damage you take. Yes, there are ways to reduce this lightning damage, so use them if you have them, but I have seen so many party wipes to this ability that I am issuing this massive warning to be careful here. The good news is that you have options. Note that Answer is undead, so you will get the bonus smite die against him. action. With that in mind, if you have the action economy available, it's possible to shred his temporary HP before he can act, using the force criticals from Killer Sweetheart to make short work of his resistances in this phase. If you prefer to play it safer, taking cover or getting out of range removes the Answer's Eye condition, meaning you won't be hit by the Stormheart Nova. If you have the movement speed, you can leave the main arena to drop the condition. Fly is extremely useful here, as it effectively doubles your movement. You can also take cover behind the archers at the entrance and exit to the arena, or behind the crystal. However, the crystals are extremely inconsistent and often don't block the condition at all, so be very cautious with this approach. This is also a good time for Global Invulnerability if you haven't. These scrolls are easily available but can be expensive. Whatever your choice here, double check your conditions before ending your turn. After surviving the blast, Answer will land with 1 HP for you to deal the killing blow. Before I go over the weapon, I will describe a very cheeky trick thanks to Proxy, who's a dear friend of the channel. In the Mountain Pass are drunk kobolds hiding in fire wine barrels. I bring one of these to the Answer arena and break them open to engage in combat. Since we're preoccupied in combat, the automatic cutscene cannot play, so we can just run over to Answer and loot his body. Obtaining the sword with 0 risk. First thing in Act 3, Balduran's Giant Slayer is a legendary +3 greatsword. The Giant Slayer passive on this is quite powerful. On hit, double the damage from your strength modifier. It also grants you advantage on attack rolls against large, huge, or gargantuan creatures. The other 2 abilities exclusive to this weapon include Giant Form, making you larger and granting 1d6 bonus damage to your weapon attacks, 27 temporary hit points, and advantage on strength ability checks and saving throws, rechargeable on short rest. The additional damage on top of an already powerful passive, not to mention being a massive giga chat, is honestly a vibe. And the last unique ability is Topple the Big Folk. Deal additional damage equal to your proficiency bonus, which should be +4 when you pass level 9, on a hit against a large, huge, or gargantuan creature. You deal an additional 2d6 slashing damage and prone the target if they fail their strength saving throw. Moving on to the Amulet slot, my choice would be the Amulet of Greater Health. Located in the House of Hope, you can obtain it from the archive using the methods described earlier. The Amulet of Health sets your Constitution score to 23 and grants advantage on Constitution saving throws. This boosted score and your beefy Paladin hit dice gives you a solid health pool, providing a nice buffer against the unexpected variances on a mode can throw at you. On top of that, Constitution saving throws are very common, and having advantage on those helps to keep your control spells in place. Our ring slots will be familiar rings we have obtained during our adventure. The first being the Ring of Protection, adding a flat +1 to our AC and saving throws. Quite simply, extra survivability. And the second, Killer Sweetheart, storing a guaranteed critical for whenever you feel like deleting an enemy with your giant sword. And lastly, for our bow slot, is the Hellrider Longbow for the +3 initiative. Purchased from Ferg, the Sharon Trader in Rivington. And the last gear variation takes advantage of piercing vulnerability, mainly focused on utilizing the features of Shah's Spear of Evening. The piercing damage is incredible and allows you the ability to smite in a radius thanks to its weapon action. This spear allows you to see through magical darkness and cast darkness on a per turn cooldown without using a spell slot, meaning you can cast it as much as you want, perfect for obscuring enemy vision or granting you a big tactical advantage in battle. The enemy AI literally breaks if you hide in darkness, or if you're standing, they'll attack you with disadvantage. If you're concerned about the lower AC of this build variation compared to the others, don't worry too much. Your high spell save DC gives you consistent control over your enemies when you need it. Darkness protects you and your party, and your damage potential is insane. These things together mean you can be confident without needing to focus on raw AC. However, if you'd like to play it a little safer with more raw AC, consider swapping your Helm slot for Balduran's Helm and your Cloak slot for the Wave Mother's Cloak. Again, pick up the Hood of the Wave from Mr. Carrion for the +2 to spell save DC and spell attack rolls for this variant. As stated, raw AC won't be as important to us with this setup, as we're going to rely more on other methods for protection. Visit Halsik for the matching Cloak of the Wave. You gain a +1 to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. To obtain our armor piece, we will have to complete the Unholy Assassin questline for a Buzzy Goal to show up. As a reminder, killing Valeria will break any Paladin's oath, but that's probably not a concern on this run, as we've already encouraged killing the Night Song by now. The death of one more Celestial annoyance is worth it for the damage potential of this build. The Bala's Armour has 14 AC plus your dexterity modifier. You also gain +2 to initiative, which is great. However, what we're here for is Aura of Murder. Enemies within 3 meters become vulnerable to piercing damage unless they are immune to it, essentially doubling your weapon damage, which I'll go over soon. While your oath is broken anyway, grab the Crater Flesh gloves from a Buzzy Girl and enjoy those sweet damage riders. Remember, those are 2d6 force damage on a crit, not 1d6 like the tooltip says, and they can apply that force damage multiple times. We'll use the Boots of Persistence for this variant as well. Pick them up from Damon and enjoy the +1 to dexterity saves and freedom of movement. Our piercing weapon of choice is Shah's Spear of Evening. To obtain this weapon, Shadowheart will have to take the evil route when confronted with a decision regarding the Night Song. Shah's Spear of Evening is a +3 spear that gains the following: Shah's Darkness, cast a dark cloud that obscures and blinds all creatures inside. This does not cost a spell slot and only requires you to wait a per turn recharge to cast it again. Thanks to the blind immunity granted by this vision, you can see through this darkness, and it synergizes well with its next passive, Shah's Blessing. You gain advantage on dexterity saving throws while lightly or heavily obscured, and this weapon deals additional 1d6 damage to creatures that are lightly or heavily obscured. This is actually bugged, and the bonus damage applies to any weapon attacks, not just the one with the spear. And finally, we have the special weapon action, Edge of Darkness, which creates a cloud of darkness as you attack in a 3-meter radius, rechargeable on a short rest. If you have set your smite reactions, you can actually smite each and every enemy in this area for effect. Combine this ability with Luck of the Far Realms or Killer Sweetheart for a massive dopamine hit. To take advantage of this ability in a more effective way, consider using Void Bulbs or Black Hole to gather more targets together. We'll use Viconia's Walking Fortress for this variant. Again, +3 AC, the advantage on saving throws versus spells, and imposing disadvantage on spell attacks aimed at us are the most important features here. Our neck piece is the Amulet of the Devout for another +2 to spell save DC. Again, the Channel Divinity charge doesn't matter. This is just a solid neck piece for any caster. I did mention the Shadow Cloaked ring in the Act 2 Honourable Mentions, but to summarize briefly, you can find this ring on the Shadow Mastiff Alpha that spawns in after you destroy the magically lit torches here, not too far from Last Light Inn. The Shadow Cloaked ring grants you an additional 1d4 weapon damage against obscured targets, and you'll start to get a lot more use out of this item once you start using darkness to your advantage. This bonus weapon damage is the same type as your weapon, and if you're using the Spear of Evening and you have Ballast Armour on, this 1d4 piercing damage goes a lot further than you think. Fëanor Nephil is the Ring of Feywild Sparks, which you'll want for the +1 to spell save DC. I know it's not on the tooltip, but it is there, I promise. It can be a tricky fight, but you're well set up for it. I did leave some tips in the hybrid variant section if you do need them. Yet again, the stat-stick Hellrider longbow from Thurg the Sharon Trader is just too good for this melee build to pass up. Honourable mentions for gear in Act 3. Sorcadins are quite versatile, and you can outfit them however you wish. Even though these mentions didn't make the main gear list due to how niche they are still quite effective. I'll start with the simplest one first. The Helldust boots can be found all the way in the corner of Gortash's office. If you want to get these early, consider using an Invis potion to walk past Gortash's coronation and into his office. Or if you're prepared to take them on, do be very cautious of the Close Fist of Bane, a devastating attack that has a damage range of 12 to 120 if you do not clear this condition with Remove Curse or use a Noble Stalk. Globes do help to mitigate the damage as an alternative. The Helldust boots feature the following: Hellcrawler, a bonus action ability that allows you to teleport to an area and deal 2d8 fire damage in a 3-meter radius, rechargeable on short rest. Do note, this fire damage also burns you, so consider using the Helldust armor to mitigate this side effect. Infernal Evasion. When you fail a saving throw, you can use a reaction to succeed instead. And the feature I care most about these boots, Steadfast. You cannot be forcibly moved by a foe's spells or actions. Do you know those stupid imps in the House of Hope? Yeah, sometimes I wish I had these boots equipped for them. And lastly, for honourable mentions, is the Dollar Amaris gear. The Fisher's Shortbow and Dollar Amaris can both be purchased from a Barzigal. Just by having these items equipped, you'll gain Dollar Amaris, which adds a flat +7 damage onto your critical hits. And since we're wielding 2 items that have this feature, this +7 gets added twice. Actually, I lied. This +7 gets added more than twice. It gets added to our weapon hit. Our smite, the Crater Flesh gloves, are adding more instances of damage. And yes, the Dollar Amaris applies to those as well. Let's discuss the consumables. Our Sorcadin will find most interesting in Act 3. Again, they're not required, but they make a lovely addition to our already powerful toolkit. Bloodlust elixirs are uncommon and occasionally show up when you trade with Popper, Damphalon, and Styling Horse in Rivington. And for your traders in the lower city, Oliver, Derif, and Sticky Dondo are your go-tos. Also a Raj if she made it here from Act 2. Another method is to craft them using 3 warp fangs and combine them with any salt. If you're on the hunt for warp fangs, there are a bunch in the warehouse by the docks. Once per turn, when you kill an enemy, you gain 5 temporary HP and an action. Combined with your smite damage, you will be destroying at least an enemy a turn. However, you will burn through your spell slots like crazy doing this. Consider using the bath in the House of Hope if you want to stretch this elixir out. Cloud Giant elixirs. You can pick these up from level 9 onwards and from any trader who has the chance to sell elixirs. The Cloud Giant elixir sets your strength to 27, giving you a massive +8 bonus to your attack and damage rolls. And now that we have the Resonant Stone and Shadow Blade to work with, that damage bonus will be doubled due to psychic vulnerability and doubled again on a crit when you decide to delete your enemies. Do you want to hear about a secret consumable? Terrazol. To find a supplier for this substance, you first need to gain access to the guild hall. There are 2 methods you can use. First, convince Tosgrunt to let you in, or acquire his ring and insert it into the slunt to reveal the secret entrance. The second method, you can take the manhole next to the Basilisk Gate waypoint, smash a wall, and then head west to find a DC-20 locked door, which leads to the guild hall. At the bar just inside, you'll find Severn, who will sell you Terrazol. These pouches are quite inexpensive, and consuming one will grant you the effects of haste. What makes this consumable special is the fact that it costs no action economy at all, meaning if you get into trouble in combat and you're out of options, it could in fact save your run. Not to mention, it can also stack on top of either a speed pot, haste, or mind sanctuary. To me, Terrazol is the ultimate crutch. You can use the extra action to throw or cast invis to drop combat, or to give you enough juice to finish an enemy. The move speed can give you a chance to reposition or flee altogether, or the +2 AC can protect you from enemy attacks. I do have to make this warning that the Terrazol jitters kicks in after 2 turns and acts like lethargy, making you miss your next turn. If you are using a speed potion as well, it's worth considering using Terrazol in the round after, so both instances of lethargic happen on the same round. However, I'm kind of a degenerate and I really like my first round burst, so I tend to go all out. Another sneaky trick is to force lethargic at the end of your turn by consuming a second Terrazol before the jitters kick in from the first one. This resets the timer on the condition, so you do not miss your next turn at all. Just be very sure you want to end your turn before using it. Since we're only level 6 in our Sorcerer split, the scroll that interests us most is Hold Monster. When you cast this scroll, you paralyze the creature. It cannot move, act, or react, but the most devastating thing about this spell is that all attacks within 3 meters are always critical hits. All throughout this guide, I've stated my preference for spell save DC. That number should be very high by Act 3, and you'll be imposing disadvantage on most enemies saving throws. So in most cases, they'll need to roll double 20s to avoid being locked down. This is even true for bosses, as this combo of imposed disadvantage and high spell save DC can even cut through legendary resistances. To use this scroll effectively, we can hold monster, then use your actions to delete said monster from the turn order. Since our spell save DC is so high, consider purchasing any damage scroll. I hoard them, and I know you hoard them as well. Most campaigns, I collect so many just to end up never using them. But if you ever get bored of too much damage with your Divine Smite and want to feel more like a spellcaster, enemies are unlikely to save and will receive either the full damage or effects of these scrolls. I only want to talk about one buff here. There are a few buffs you can find in Act 3, but they're honestly more interesting for the sort of optimization you do in a solo run, which isn't the point of this video. The one I want to talk about will be a nice boost to your defenses in early Act 3 and feels very thematic for a Paladin. Anointed in Splendor is a buff that can benefit all Sorcadins. To obtain this, you'll need to head to Stormshore Tabernacle and offer 4,500 gold to any of the deities. Note that after you've donated, you'll need to close the donation window yourself. It doesn't close automatically. If you have any issues with this triggering, try putting the gold in a container first. Once you have made your offering, you'll obtain Anointed in Splendor, granting you a +2 to saving throws. And onto Illithid Powers. So this time we're talking about the ones unlocked by accepting the partial Illithid form. This is not an easy choice to make on a playthrough and won't be right for everyone. And I'll remind you here again that you don't really need these to be successful, but they do make you very powerful should you succumb to that temptation. Fly is an ability you unlock by default if you make this choice. It is probably the most powerful thing about being partial Illithid, if I'm being honest. It costs only half your movement to use this ability, effectively doubling your available movement in combat if you use it consistently. Great for avoiding difficult terrain, getting over obstacles, and outmaneuvering your enemies, allowing you to position well. Do not sleep on the advantage this ability gives you. Oh honey, it's Luck of the Far Realms again. I know I mentioned it again, but it's important enough to repeat here. The ability to change any attack roll into a critical is monumental in Act 3 and can get you out of some extremely difficult fights, especially the ones of enemies you can't use a hold spell on. Even further, it synergizes perfectly with our Crater Flesh damage riders, allowing you to smite even the toughest foes into oblivion. This next one is a very unintended game feature. I will state that you absolutely do not need this at all whatsoever for a successful Honor mode playthrough or Sorcadin build. This is purely here for fun and mostly aimed at returning players and subsequent playthroughs where you want to goof around and hear that lovely divine smite sound over and over again. With the partial Illithid ability, free cast, and any aura, you can continually create high-level spell slots and sorcery points using your second level sorcerer features. I'll use the Resonant Stone aura in this example. Simply toggle free cast on and create a high-level spell slot, then move into the range of the aura. You should now see that your free cast is available to use again. Toggle it on and create a high-level spell slot, then move out of the aura and back in again to repeat the process. You can create sorcery points the exact same way as well. Just note that these excess sorcery points and spell slots will be reset if you use the Potion of Angelic Slumber, Raphael's Bath, or take a long rest. Moving on to Mind Sanctuary in Honor mode, this creates a dome with a radius of 9 meters, which gives you the effects of haste. As of patch 8, the effect allows you to regain all your martial attacks. So for our build, we can attack an additional 2 times under the Mind Sanctuary. This is an incredible buff that works safely in conjunction with Terrasul and benefits your entire party. Just be aware that your enemies can and will make use of it as well. To finish this section off, let's go over some Act 3 gameplay examples. Our core abilities and strategies are the same, with the difference being that we have more powerful damaging gear, starting with the Cuck beach fight, as I like to call it. The initiative roll started and we flew in. Our spell save is wild, with success rates ranging from 96 to 99%, plus the disadvantage to mental saving throws we impose on the enemy. An upcastage and quicken or person allows us to lock down the battlefield, and the action economy from Bloodlust allows us to delete 3 enemies from the turn order. Switching the scenery to the docks, command to an upcasted at level 5 can select up to 5 targets. The percentage was 95s all round. It would have been 99%, but I kind of forgot the Resonant Stone for this footage. The enemies approached and she made them flee for fun, even proccing an opportunity attack. Honestly, she was just playing with her food, going through the command variants. But the point is, control spells completely shut down and remove the enemy's turn. Cazador is a pretty difficult fight, with high initiative, resistances, and strong burst damage. He will test your party. He has +10 initiative, and since I wanted to do this fight with only one character, I swapped out her helmet for the Mask of Soul Perception for +2 initiative. She chugged a speed potion, went for a booming blade into an execution crit, opening the fight with Cazador at half strength. Her next hit was a Luck of the Far Realms crit, and it took one more additional hit to send him back to his coffin. Bloodlust procced, and we used our remaining action economy to delete Chatterteeth. Since we hit Kazi from a sneaking stance and within melee range, it gave us a surprise round. The enemies passed the turn, and the fight became almost a sandbox in terms of choice. Sleet Storm kept most of the enemies under control and prevented them from swarming us, and the ones that did manage to get to us couldn't get past our AC. Our spell save is so high that we can really use any of our scrolls here. Lastly, let's go over a fight that everyone loves, Raphael. I'll keep it brief. Throw a speed potion on the ground, start the fight, quick and hold monster. We commit by flying into the speed potion splash. With Terrasol and 3 action points, we were ready to unleash onto the devil. Now for some tech and mechanical breakdowns that will improve your quality of life on your future playthroughs. BG3 is a dense and mechanically rich game that allows you a ton of freedom in how you approach every aspect. Some of the things we're going to go over are simply explanations of how certain mechanics work and how you can capitalize on them. And some of these things are unintended gameplay features. Lucky for us, Larian appreciate that rules are meant to be broken, so I don't think they'll be too upset with us. With that being said, let's look at some Sorcadin Tech. Manual smiting and reaction toggles. By default, the game enables smites only on critical. However, if you go into the reactions menu and manually toggle them onto ask, you'll get more burst damage out of your Sorcadin. In Act 1, you can easily get 3 smites at level 5. Attack 1, reaction smite. Attack 2, reaction smite again. And then pommel strike to smite off of that one for a third. Infinite sorcery points and spell slots. This next one is very much an unintended gameplay feature. I will state that you absolutely do not need this for a successful Honor mode playthrough or Sorcadin build. This is purely here for fun and mostly aimed for returning players and subsequent playthroughs, where you want to goof around and hear that lovely divine smite sound over and over again. The first infinite method can be found in Act 2, and there's 2 of them. The Potion of Angelic Reprieve is sold by Lantar and Moonrise Towers, and I recommend stocking up on this item if you want to engage with this particular tech. Using this potion causes you to fall asleep for 2 turns, which has the effects of a short rest, in addition to restoring your first and second level spell slots. Now here's where it gets silly. The game remembers how many spell slots you've created and will restore them after using this potion, even if you have none left after the conversion. Let me demonstrate to you what I mean by converting on my level 2 spell slots to sorcery points, and my sorcery points to level 2 spell slots, and my spell slots to sorcery points, and so on and so forth until I decide to use an angelic reprieve to gill nap and wake up with more spell slots than I know what to do with. You can repeat this cycle as many times as you want, but honestly 2 or 3 cycles is all you need because it's exponential. Do be warned, these do not persist after a long rest or when you use the restoration pod, as I've learnt the hard way, and also you do not need this trick to be successful with this build. It's catered for those who want to have extended periods of battle or fun on a subsequent playthrough. Shielded Devotion. I covered this in the Honourable Mentions of Act 2, but I'll go over it again here quickly. Quartermaster Tally sells the Shielded Devotion, allowing us to generate as many spell slots and sorcery points as we want. Simply convert all your spell slots to sorcery points and your sorcery points to level 2 spells. Then equip the shield, giving you an additional level 1 spell slot to convert to sorcery points. Then unequip and re-equip the shield to get that level 1 spell slot again to convert to more sorcery points. You can create as many points as you want, which can be used to make more level 2 spell slots. When you're bored of this conversion, take a nap using an angelic reprieve potion and wake up with enough spell slots to annihilate Act 2 without needing a long rest. This next method is honestly the most easy and convenient, but only accessible in Act 3. For infinite spell slots and sorcery points, you'll need a level 2 sorcerer, the partial Illithid ability, free cast, and almost any aura. Feel free to experiment, but these are the ones I tested. For this demo, I'll be using the Resonance Stone. Optionally, before you start, grab the free cast icon from your spellbook and put it on your hotbar. Now toggle free cast on and create a high level spell slot, then move out of the aura and back into the aura. See how the icon refreshes when you go back in? This means you can create another spell slot. You can use this same method to create sorcery points as well. So to summarize, move out of any aura and back in to refresh free cast. You can do this as many times as you want, giving you infinite sorcery points and spell slots. It works whether the item is on the floor or in one of your party members' inventories. As a final note, if you take an angelic slumber potion or long rest, your sorcery points and spell slots will be reset. Arcane Acuity and Spell Save DC. Following this guide, you'll have access to 2 pieces of equipment that grant Arcane Acuity. So what is Arcane Acuity? To put it simply, for every turn of Arcane Acuity, you gain a +1 to Spell Save DC and spell attack rolls, stacking to a maximum of 10 turns. Now that you have a basic understanding of it, let's go over some methods of building Acuity. Starting with the most basic method, just hitting your enemy. Wearing just the Arcane Acuity helmet, under normal circumstances, you only gain 2 turns of Arcane Acuity on a hit, but if you use Smite as a reaction, you can double this to 4. However, if you use a Smite spell that uses a bonus action, such as Raffle, Searing, or Thunderous, you'll gain a total of 6 Acuity. Wear both the Arcane Acuity helmet and Battle Mage's gloves, and your Acuity generation gets a bit silly. When you have both of these pieces on and use Booming Blade, you gain 4 Acuity, and when you react with a Smite on the same attack, you double it to 8. And if you use one of those bonus action Smite spells, you'll get the max cap of 10. I even noticed in testing that throwing potions on the ground also generates 2 stacks, which can be very efficient pre-combat preparation. With all that in mind, you can see that you have options for building up Acuity, which you can then pair with a quickened meta magic control spell for incredible effect. Here are some use cases with boosted spell save. I won't go over every single scenario, but these examples are extremely effective. Command is very versatile, and there's almost a use case for every variant. Let's briefly go over each one. Command Approach helps group enemies together for an AoE smite or spell. Command Drop forces an enemy to waste their action to re-equip weapons, or you could just pocket what they drop so they're left defenseless. Command Flee sets you up for a next turn opportunity attack when they run away from you. Command Grovel is what allows you and your party to gain advantage on attack rolls against the enemy, and Command Hold stops their turn entirely. Consider using Sorcerer to extend this spell to make it last for 2 turns, or upcast it to control the entire battlefield. Hypnotic Pattern has a 9-meter AoE, and creatures that are affected cannot attack you, nor can they move or act. This lasts for 2 turns and is a very effective AoE shutdown. Sleet Storm is a 10-turn concentration spell that creates a magical storm of snow, hail, and ice every turn. This counts as difficult terrain, and creatures walking on it will have their move speed halved and fall prone on a failed dexterity saving throw. Did you know that the save for slipping and falling on your ass is determined by your spell save DC? And let's be real here, who doesn't want to see an archdevil slip over and over again in his own home? Sleet Storm will also refreeze the area at the start of every turn, so you can melt it with fire spells without any worrying. I don't think there's any enemy in the game that can reliably save against DC 28 with Arcane Acuity or 21 with my hybrid build, which makes Sleet Storm incredibly effective as a shutdown and control for large fights. For example, the House and Portal fight can be completely transformed into a comedy show with this one spell. Any fight with natural checkpoints is a perfect area for Sleet Storm as well. I do like to use this spell with another party member who is immune to slipping. The enemies will try their hardest to attack this ally but fall flat on their face each time. You can also pair this with other surfaces as well. Strangely, if you put on a wall of fire first and Sleet Storm after, enemies will both burn and slip turn after turn. Next is my favorite use for Acuity. Hold Person and Hold Monster paralyzes a creature, meaning it cannot move, act, or react, and any attacks within 3 meters are always critical hits. It's very action efficient, as you can quicken this spell and free up your actions to attack. This spell is a literal delete button for the enemy. And lastly, a quick mention to spell scrolls. The pieces of paper I rarely ever use due to my low intelligence stat, but maybe it's kind of worth it thanks to my high spell save DC. Damage, rider, sources. This is a very complex topic, and I will do my best to explain it to you in regards to our Sorcadin. The simplest way I can phrase what DRS is to you is that we can gear and equip our character to add multiple lines and colors to the damage log. And thankfully, Sorcadin is one of the builds where our natural kit does this organically thanks to Divine Smite. One thing I'll note before we get into the complex stuff is that you might consider half-orc for your build. This is one of the very few times an origin or race is actually worth considering for a build, but it is certainly not mandatory. The half-orc racial passive, Savage Attacks, rolls an extra damage die when you score a critical hit. In regards to our Sorcadin build, this can proc itself multiple times. On weapon hit, on Craterous Wounds, and smite, only if you manually click the spell at level 4. It will not happen otherwise. Next we'll discuss for Lara Louv. When you use their weapon ability to shriek, any enemy affected takes an additional 1d4 thunder damage. This 1d4 thunder can be procced multiple times. For instance, on an ability that has multiple projectiles, such as Magic Missile, this thunder damage is added to each one. In the context of our build, you can use this to support and enable other party members, as their attacks will also trigger this additional thunder damage. The Crater Flesh Gloves are probably my favorite surviving damage rider source in Honor mode. Quite simply, when you crit, you deal an additional 1d6 force damage, except that 1d6 gets turned into 2d6 because the dice itself is a critical, and that is only the beginning of the jank. Any source of damage you do on a critical gets added as a Crater Flesh Rider. Weapon attack, add a Crater Flesh line. Smite, add another one. Smite on an undead or fiend, yet another one. Throw in some other DRS, and the Crater Flesh lines keep adding and adding. This synergizes insanely well with the Dollar-Amaris gear, which add a flat +7 on crit, and you can equip multiple Dollar-Amaris. That means any damage line you see gets this number added again and again. It does get a little silly. It could added thrice to our weapon hit. Smite, bonus smite damage to undead and fiends, and each instance of Crater Flesh proc. The Damage Rider rabbit hole goes very deep in BG3. DRS basically means your damage is stacking again and again in very insane ways. And honestly, it serves more as a flashy showcase than anything practical, as it takes several turns to set up. We have to use our lab rat to test because nothing in the game has enough HP to survive the damage, and we need our subject to survive to see all the interactions. However, should you choose to deliberately seek out how to add DRS to your attacks, this can be the result. And yes, this was recorded on an honor mode save, purely to see the DRS interactions. Again, this is a very superficial look at damage riders. If you want to explore this topic further, I have linked the wiki page in the description. Double Dagger, double smiting. As the name suggests, you can double smite with your Paladin with just one attack, provided you meet some very specific conditions. These conditions being, you have 2 daggers equipped, and no sweetheart, Shadow Blade is not considered a dagger. You have attacked normally once this combat. You manually click the smite action and only use 2nd or 3rd level spell slots. You have toggled dual wielding off, and you are tall enough to look Shadowheart in the eyes. It'll make more sense once I walk you through the steps. First, I attack my enemy. Since this attack is not affected, I use my level 4 smite. Next, I click on the smite action. Remember, you can only use 2nd or 3rd level spell slots here, so I picked a level 3 smite. This is what happens. And now the daggers will proc double smites every time I manually smite, without the need to perform the unaffected setup attack every time, meaning all my attacks until the end of combat will smite twice as I manually click a level 2 or level 3 smite. Obviously, this tech is quite niche, as it requires you to use an attack first to set it up, and will burn through spell slots twice as fast as normal. AC Maxxing. Armor class determines what the enemy has to roll as a minimum to actually hit your character. In Honor mode, enemies have absurd proficiencies and bonuses added onto their attack rolls, so it is in our best interest to maintain a somewhat high AC. Here is a very low effort and quick way I boost my AC during my solo runs. Blink and you'll miss it. Okay, let me walk you through what just happened. We started a 33 AC, Speed Potion, Terrasul, and Mirror Image. In the blink of an eye, we gained 13 AC. However, this is purely showcasing. It's not necessary to go to these lengths, as the highest attack bonus I've seen in the game is the Red Dragon at the Brain Fight with plus 16, and most enemies will be around plus 13. The Githyanki and Saravok are good examples. If you have crit immunity, then any natural 20s rolled against your AC, you will no longer be guaranteed to be hit. Instead, the enemies will add their modifiers to the roll as normal, and if 20 plus their modifiers still mates or beats your AC, you will be hit, but you only take regular damage. At 37 AC, you should be close to untouchable, and the game will reflect this by having most enemies skip their turn instead of trying to attack. So consider swapping Shield of Faith for Blur for imposing disadvantage on enemy attack rolls instead of raw AC. Thank you for making it to the end. Sorcadin is one of my favorite builds, and I hope it finds you well. Let me know your experience with it, and best of luck on your adventure.